Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. On a spring day in 2021, the Seoul police received a distressing call. The caller reported that their friend had been missing for several days. They couldn't reach her, and no one answered when they knocked on her door. As the police began their investigation, a horrifying crime gradually came to light. The main character of today's story is Young Young, born in 1996. Growing up without a father, she was raised by her loving mother alongside her younger sister in Noan District, Seoul. Currently, her sister is a college student, often busy with her studies. Young Young not only played the role of an older sister, but also shouldered part of the financial responsibility, contributing to her sister's living expenses. Young Young worked as a staff member at a veterinary hospital. With her attractive appearance and outgoing, friendly personality, she was well-liked by friends and colleagues. At 25, her life wasn't much different from other girls her age. She enjoyed spending her free time shopping, hanging out with friends, enjoying good meals, and singing at lively karaoke sessions. Young Young frequently shared beautiful moments from her daily life on social media, viewing it as a way to preserve and spread joy to those around her. Additionally, Young Young was an avid online gamer, particularly fond of League of Legends, a team-based game requiring coordinated gameplay among multiple players. In November 2020, through League of Legends, Young Young met a male player with the nickname HYO Pajik, whose real name was Kim Tae-hyun. Kim Tae-hyun was born in Busan and was the same age as Young Young. His family consisted of 4 members, with him being the eldest son. However, the family atmosphere was often tense due to constant arguments between his parents. A family tragedy occurred shortly after the birth of the second child, when Kim Tae-hyun's parents decided to divorce. After this upheaval, Kim Tae-hyun and his relatives moved to Seoul and settled in Gangnam District. Gangnam is a bustling commercial area of Seoul, home to many high-end luxury stores and services. Due to his family's difficult circumstances, Kim Tae-hyun could only afford to live in a basement room with cheap rent. During his school years, Kim Tae-hyun attended Dankuk University High School. Although he completed high school, he didn't pursue a college education. Instead, due to his strong passion for online gaming, Kim Tae-hyun decided to find a part-time job at an internet cafe. There, he could work while indulging in his personal hobby. At the age of 20, Kim Tae-hyun began his mandatory military service. After a few years of service, he completed his duty and was discharged with the rank of sergeant. After discharge, he still hadn't found stable employment. At one point, he tried working at a restaurant, but Kim Tae-hyun quit after just one day. Without a steady job, Kim Tae-hyun spent his days at internet cafes playing games. There, he immersed himself in the virtual world of video games, using it as a way to kill time in his challenging and stagnant real life. In November 2020, while playing League of Legends, Kim Tae-hyun was randomly matched with Jang Dae-hyun. Their good teamwork and positive impression from that match led them to become friends and start chatting more in the game. Gradually, Kim Tae-hyun developed feelings for Jang Dae-hyun. He began spending more time online, waiting for moments when she would appear in the game. Through their conversations, they were surprised to discover that they both lived in Seoul. As a result, they exchanged phone numbers and expanded their conversations beyond the game. After 2 months of acquaintance, Kim Tae-hyun boldly suggested a face-to-face meeting. They chose to meet at a familiar internet cafe. The first meeting took place in a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. Both Kim Tae-hyun and Jang Dae-hyun felt a good impression of each other, seemingly signaling a promising start to their relationship. By mid-January, Kim Tae-hyun invited Jang Dae-hyun out again. However, this time, Jang Dae-hyun didn't come alone, but brought along a male friend and a female friend. This made Kim Tae-hyun feel very uncomfortable. Throughout the meeting, he remained visibly upset, silent, and didn't participate in the conversation, causing the atmosphere to become very tense. Jang Dae-hyun felt very embarrassed and tried several times to lighten the gloomy atmosphere, but to no avail. Kim Tae-hyun maintained his irritated attitude and even ended up arguing with Jang Dae-hyun's male friend. Only when others intervened did they stop. Finally, the meeting ended in an unpleasant mood. After returning home, Jang Dae-hyun felt very angry. She immediately texted Kim Tae-hyun, clearly stating that she would no longer contact him, and then blocked all communication with him. However, Jang Dae-hyun could never have imagined that meeting this man would become the greatest tragedy of her life. At around 8 p.m. on March 25, 2021, the known police station received an emergency call. The caller was a friend of Jang Dae-hyun, who told the police that they hadn't been able to contact Jang Dae-hyun for several days. According to information from her friends, 2 days earlier on March 23rd, Jang Dae-hyun had planned to go out with a group of friends. However, when the appointed time came, Jang Dae-hyun didn't show up. This made the group of friends feel very strange because Jang Dae-hyun was always punctual and had never been late or suddenly canceled plans. Initially, everyone thought that Jang Dae-hyun might have had an unexpected matter to attend to, so they didn't pay much attention to it. However, in the following days, they repeatedly tried to contact Jang Dae-hyun, but her phone was always unreachable. She also didn't show up at the veterinary hospital where she worked. Worried about their friend's safety, the group went together to the apartment complex in known district where Jang Dae-hyun lived. When they arrived, they found Jang Dae-hyun's apartment door locked, with several unclaimed packages outside. The group of friends then sought out the building manager and asked for the phone numbers of Jang Dae-hyun's mother and sister. Strangely, both of these numbers were also unreachable. At this point, the group of friends suddenly remembered their last phone call with Jang Dae-hyun. Before hanging up, she seemed to have been startled and said to someone, "Why are you here?" Then quickly ended the call. Thinking about this, the group of friends suddenly felt an ominous premonition. They immediately called the police. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly tracked the phone locations of Jang Dae-hyun, her mother, and her sister. The results showed that all three were inside the apartment. The police immediately dispatched forces to Jang Dae-hyun's apartment at 8:20 p.m. After breaking down the door and entering, the scene before their eyes left everyone present stunned. Jang Dae-hyun, 25 years old, her mother, 59 years old, and her sister, 22 years old, were lying motionless in different parts of the house. All three bodies had multiple stab wounds, with fatal wounds to their necks. In addition to the three victims at the scene, the police also found a man lying in a pool of blood with a knife still in his body. This man was still alive and was quickly taken to the hospital for emergency treatment. Soon after, the identity of the man was quickly determined. It was none other than Kim Tae-hyun, the friend Jung Dae-hyun had met in the game. After recovering, Kim Tae-hyun was interrogated by the police. He didn't deny his actions and immediately confessed to the murders. According to the investigation, Jung Dae-hyun had previously confided to her friends about her worry over how Kim Tae-hyun had discovered her home address. It was found that Kim Tae-hyun had traced clues from photos Jung Dae-hyun had posted on social media. He had noticed information on packages in the photos, and from there found out Jang Dae-hyun's home address. After obtaining the address, Kim Tae-hyun had stalked Jang Dae-hyun multiple times and even came to her house. His feelings for Jang Dae-hyun were entirely one-sided. Jang Dae-hyun herself had no intention of taking the relationship further. When Kim Tae-hyun learned that Jang Dae-hyun had blocked communication with him, he became extremely angry and planned his revenge. Before committing the crime, he had made some preparations, such as searching online for phrases like the fastest way to kill someone. After the crime, he also used his phone to search for information about Maple Bridge. Maple Bridge spans the Han River in central Seoul. This bridge has been the site of hundreds of suicides, earning it the nickname Bridge of Death. It's possible that Kim Tae-hyun had intended to go there to commit suicide. Jang Dae-hyun's friend told the police that Kim Tae-hyun was Hye-ho Pajik, Jang Dae-hyun's in-game friend. 2 months before the incident, they had an unpleasant meeting. After that, Jang Dae-hyun had blocked all contact with him. However, from that point on, the once friendly in-game teammate had become a terrifying real-life stalker. Kim Tae-hyun continuously called and sent harassing messages to Jang Dae-hyun. He even bought expensive gifts for her and demanded to meet to mend their relationship, but was always refused by Jang Dae-hyun. After that, Kim Tae-hyun employed a new tactic. He used unknown phone numbers to call Jang Dae-hyun and frequently loitered around the veterinary hospital where she worked. To avoid encountering him, Jang Dae-hyun was forced to change her route to and from work. Until one day, when Jang Dae-hyun and her friends were at a karaoke, her mother suddenly called saying there was a strange man ringing the doorbell and claiming to be her boyfriend. Hearing this, Jang Dae-hyun hurriedly told her mother not to open the door under any circumstances. Jang Dae-hyun recounted the incident to her friends, and expressed her concern about how Kim Tae-hyun had found out her home address. Not only did he stalk her at home, but Kim Tae-hyun also came to the veterinary hospital where Jong Dae-hyun worked to cause trouble. Out of fear, Jong Dae-hyun didn't dare to go home alone and had to ask her friends to escort her. With her life turned upside down by Kim Tae-hyun's stalking behavior, Jong Dae-hyun had to change her phone number. According to the investigation, around 5 p.m. on the day of the incident, Kim Tae-hyun appeared at the apartment complex where Jong Dae-hyun lived, looking very suspicious. He was dressed in black and carrying a white backpack. Inside the backpack were a change of clothes, blue tape, leather gloves, and other tools for committing the crime. He seemed very familiar with the area, having stalked Jong Dae-hyun many times as she came home from work. At 5:13 p.m., Kim Tae-hyun entered a nearby internet cafe that Jong Dae-hyun frequently visited. He chose a secluded seat, didn't turn on the computer, and only sat for a few minutes before leaving. He paid in cash. At 5:22 p.m., Kim Tae-hyun appeared in the smoking area behind a building, constantly looking around as if searching for someone. At 5:25 p.m., Kim Tae-hyun went into a nearby convenience store and bought a bottle of water, a pack of cigarettes, and a lighter. There, he stole a knife from the store. At 5:40 p.m., Kim Tae-hyun reappeared at Jang Dae-hyun's apartment complex. He entered the building, pretending to be a delivery person, when he encountered the security guard, then went straight up to Jang Dae-hyun's apartment floor. Then, Kim Tae-hyun knocked on Jang Dae-hyun's door, saying he was a delivery person. From inside, a female voice asked him to leave the package at the door. Kim Tae-hyun placed the fake package on the ground and pretended to leave, but actually hid just outside the door. At this time, only Jang Dae-hyun's sister was at home. The sister texted her mother and older sister asking if anyone had ordered anything online, but both her mother and sister replied that they hadn't. However, before waiting for her mother and sister to reply, Jang Dae-hyun's sister had already put down her phone and went to open the door. As soon as she opened the door, Jang Dae-hyun's sister was bending down to pick up the package when suddenly Kim Tae-hyun lunged from the side and used his foot to block the door. They both froze, staring at each other. At this moment, Kim Tae-hyun realized that the girl in front of him was not Young Dae-hyun, but her sister. Young Dae-hyun's sister felt terrified, but before she could react, Kim Tae-hyun pushed her into the house. He slammed the door shut, immediately pulled out the knife he had stolen from the convenience store, and repeatedly stabbed her. The young woman collapsed and died on the spot. After killing Young Dae-hyun's sister, Kim Tae-hyun carried her body to the bedroom, placed it on the bed, and covered it with a blanket. He didn't flee immediately, but stayed to rummage through the house, looking for money, then hid in a room. At 10:30 p.m., Jang Dae-hyun's mother returned home unsuspectingly. Kim Tae-hyun had been waiting, and he suddenly lunged out from behind and attacked her. Over an hour later, Jang Dae-hyun finished her shift and returned home. As soon as she entered the house, she was shocked to see her mother lying motionless in a pool of blood. The door to one bedroom was ajar, with her dead sister lying on the bed. Witnessing this horrifying scene, Jang Dae-hyun collapsed, hugging her mother's body and wailing in despair. At that moment, Kim Tae-hyun emerged from the he pulled Jang Dae-hyun to her feet and stabbed her. Jang Dae-hyun couldn't resist and collapsed. After murdering Jang Dae-hyun's entire family, Kim Tae-hyun used the knife on himself, but due to excessive blood loss, he passed out. However, he didn't die. After regaining consciousness, feeling thirsty, Kim Tae-hyun took beer and milk from the refrigerator to drink. Following this, Kim Tae-hyun repeated his actions timidly, but he deliberately stabbed himself in non-vital areas, so he survived. Afterward, he changed into the clothes he had prepared in his backpack, replacing his blood-soaked outfit. Then Kim Tae-hyun committed an even more horrifying act. He lay next to Jang Dae-hyun's body, and used her phone to delete his name from her friends list and block certain close contacts. For 3 days after killing the 3 victims, he reset their phones to factory settings. He lived like this with the 3 bodies for 3 days, eating all the food in the house until the police arrived and arrested him. When interrogated, Kim Tae-hyun confessed that his motive for the crime was that Jang Dae-hyun had ignored his feelings, which led him to develop the intention to kill. The police charged Kim Tae-hyun with 5 crimes, including murder, theft, and illegal trespassing. Kim Tae-hyun's brutal criminal acts caused a fierce wave of indignation in South Korean public opinion. Over 250,000 people signed a petition to the Blue House demanding that the government disclose Kim Tae-hyun's personal information and punish him severely. When appearing before the media, Kim Tae-hyun always maintained a calm demeanor and showed no remorse. A criminal psychology expert commented, "The most dangerous criminals are those who feel more confident after committing crimes, even when facing the media." This case has caused a stir in South Korean public opinion and made people feel confused and scared. They have raised awareness about protecting personal information on packages, even using tools to erase personal information from packages. A day after Kim Tae-hyun was arrested, the South Korean National Assembly passed a law punishing stalking crimes, effective from September of the same year. This law targets individuals who commit the crime of stalking others with a maximum penalty of 3 years in prison or a fine of 30 million won, approximately $26,000. According to the investigation, Jong Dae-hyun was not the first victim Kim Tae-hyun had harassed. Previously, he had exhibited similar behavior towards a male gamer with the nickname Lee Yun-ho. Kim Tae-hyun had shown excessive concern, even resorting to violence and threats against Lee Yun-ho. Kim Tae-hyun's extreme personality had been evident since childhood. He had a history of animal abuse and was a withdrawn child. A high school classmate recalled, he usually spoke very softly, always kept to himself, but would occasionally burst into angry shouting fits that terrified everyone. Notably, the reasons for Kim Tae-hyun's anger were often trivial matters. Additionally, he was very fond of gaming and was quite skilled at it. Most of the time, he appeared quiet and reserved, but occasionally displayed a hot-tempered, aggressive nature. During one gaming session with friends, Kim Tae-hyun suddenly became enraged, smashing objects and intending to fight. The owner of the internet cafe where Kim Tae-hyun once worked shared. Previously, he had been very fond of Kim Tae-hyun because he seemed gentle and honest. After being discharged from the military, Kim Tae-hyun came to this internet cafe owner because he couldn't find stable employment. The kind-hearted owner hired him for part-time work, providing food, lodging, and free gaming during his free time. However, after some time, the internet cafe owner discovered that money was consistently disappearing from the shop. Upon checking the security cameras, he found that Kim Tae-hyun had stolen several $100,000 won, equivalent to several $100s on multiple occasions. The owner felt very disappointed, but considering Kim Tae-hyun's youth and that everyone makes mistakes, he worried that reporting to the police would leave a criminal record affecting Kim Tae-hyun's future. Therefore, the internet cafe owner decided to let it go and simply fired Kim Tae-hyun. According to the internet cafe owner, he suspected Kim Tae-hyun had intellectual issues, unable to perform even simple calculations. Moreover, during Kim Tae-hyun's time working at the internet cafe, he frequently witnessed his fits of rage. When angry, he would smash tables, chairs, and walls until his hands bled. These anger episodes were quite frequent, occurring about once or twice a month. Besides violent behavior, Kim Tae-hyun also showed tendencies towards sexual crimes. After being discharged from the military, he was fined 2 million won, about $1,700, for sneaking into a women's restroom to film secretly. A year later, Kim Tae-hyun was again fined 2 million won for exposing himself to a high school girl. Thus, within just 2 years, he had been involved in sexual crimes twice and received administrative penalties. However, very few people around him knew he was a sex offender. After Kim Tae-hyun's arrest, police examined his phone and discovered he frequently accessed pornographic websites. Additionally, in 2015 at the age of 18, Kim Tae-hyun was fined $3,001,000, about $2,600, for the crime of insulting others in public. On June 1, 2021, Kim Tae-hyun's trial began at the Seoul Central District Court. The case attracted special attention from the entire South Korean society. At the trial, Kim Tae-hyun claimed he had no intention of killing Yoon Byung's sister and mother, stating their deaths were accidental. However, evidence provided by the victims' family showed that after killing the victims, Kim Tae-hyun had used their phones to text their mother. This action completely contradicted Kim Tae-hyun's testimony. The killing of the other 2 victims was clearly intentional murder. For months later, the Seoul Central District Court delivered its final verdict. Defendant Kim Tae-hyun was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 5 crimes. Kim Tae-hyun subsequently appealed, arguing that the sentence was too harsh. 6 months later, the Seoul High Court rejected the appeal, upholding the original sentence. The victim's family expressed opposition to the court's verdict. They believed Kim Tae-hyun deserved the death penalty. Although South Korean law still retains the death penalty, in practice, it hasn't been applied for many years. Kim Tae-hyun is a type of criminal with typical antisocial behaviors, sensitive, paranoid, with social communication barriers. When rejected, he views the other party as a mortal enemy and seeks revenge. Maintaining contact with such individuals harbors many dangers, even life-threatening risks. The victim, Jong Byung, had recognized the abnormal signs and proactively cut off communication with Kim Tae-hyun. However, despite being extremely cautious, she could not have anticipated his cruel actions. Tragically, not only Jong Byung, but also her mother and sister suffered the same devastating fate. The perpetrator, Kim Tae-hyun, ultimately paid the price for his brutal crime. He will spend the rest of his life behind prison bars. The tragic deaths of Jong Byung, her mother, and her sister are not only an irreplaceable loss for the victim's family, but also a wake-up call for the entire society. This heartbreaking story serves as a reminder to all of us about the fragility of life and the importance of protecting ourselves and our loved ones from hidden dangers in society. Story 2. We'll explore a case where the perpetrator's meticulous planning led police to a dead end in their investigation, causing unexpected twists in the case. Notably, this case ultimately led to direct amendments to Taiwan's criminal law. What kind of case could have such a significant impact? The main character in this case is Chun Naomi, a famous internet model in Taiwan. She was born in Dongshan Township, Yulon County. She has a twin sister named Chin Xiling. Both were stunningly beautiful. The elder sister, Chun Xiling, was often interviewed by the media and was dubbed Taiwan's most beautiful jewelry store employee. In 2017, leveraging their attractive appearances and large social media followings, the sisters moved from Yulon County to Taipei City. They rented a house in the outskirts of New Taipei City and began their careers as internet celebrities, doing photo shoots, game endorsements, and more, hoping to build their own careers. At around 10:30 a.m. on March 1st, when Naomi carefully put on her makeup at home and went out. Due to her busy daily schedule, mostly consisting of outdoor photo shoots, her sister didn't pay much attention and just said goodbye as Naomi left. But by early the next morning, despite dozens of phone calls, Chin Xiling still couldn't reach her sister. Until she received a text message saying, "I'm fine," Chin Xiling felt something was off. This seemingly normal message was actually quite unusual, because her sister didn't use Chinese characters, but English phonetic spelling instead. In Taiwan, people often use both Chinese characters and English phonetic spelling when texting. However, Chin Xiling knew her sister never used English phonetic spelling, considering it pretentious. But this time, her reply was completely out of character. Chin Xiling immediately asked, "Where are you?" But the other party kept evading the question. Perhaps due to twin intuition, Chin Xiling immediately went to the nearest police station to report her sister missing. The police quickly traced Chin Naomi's phone, but the location showed neither New Taipei City nor Taipei, but Taichung City, over 60 miles to the south. Upon learning this, Chun Xiling and her boyfriend drove through the night to Taichung to search for her sister, continuously calling to inquire about her whereabouts. Finally, they got some information from her friends. They said she had gone for an outdoor photo shoot with a photographer introduced by her close friend, Liang Sihui. This photographer was Liang Sihui's boyfriend named Chunyu. The police interrogated these two, but Liang Sihui consistently denied meeting Chin Naomi and claimed she didn't know her whereabouts. After several rounds of questioning, Liang told the police that Chin Naomi might be with a clothing manufacturer, but she couldn't say who. Later, she provided several phone numbers for Chin Xiling to contact, but strangely, none of them could be reached. At this point, Liang Sihui was continuously questioned by Chin Naomi's family and friends. Feeling frustrated and wronged, around 8 a.m. the next day, she posted on social media complaining that the most absurd thing in her life was being accused of kidnapping Chin Naomi. However, Chin Xiling became increasingly certain of her suspicions about Liang Sihui, because in many text messages, Liang Sihui used English phonetic spelling very similar to the message she had received from her sister's phone. Initially on the morning of March 1st, Chin Naomi was still chatting normally in the work group, but by noon, English phonetic spelling started appearing. They suspected that it was Liang Sihui using Chin Naomi's phone to send messages. In Taiwan, people often use both Chinese characters and English phonetic spelling when texting. However, Chin Xiling knew her sister never used English phonetic spelling. Considering it pretentious, But this time, her reply was completely out of character. Moreover, although Liang Sihui and Qin Naomi appeared to be close friends on social media, Liang consistently misspelled Qin Naomi's name. Internet users questioned their friendship, wondering how someone could be so close yet unable to spell their best friend's name correctly. Unable to contact her sister, Qin Xiling spent a sleepless night. Unexpectedly, at 8 to 10 a.m. the next morning, her sister's phone suddenly connected. However, the voice on the other end was that of an unfamiliar man. He claimed to be an employee of the five-star Evergreen Laurel Hotel in Taichung, saying he had found the phone in a storage room and was about to report it to the police when the call came through. Worried about her sister, Qin Xiling hadn't bathed or slept for 2 days. She even posted online expressing, "I don't want to live your share of life. I just want you to live with me." This call ignited a glimmer of hope for Qin Xiling. She rushed to the hotel to confirm the situation and immediately reported to the Taichung police. While waiting for the police to arrive, she tried to persuade the hotel manager to let her search for her sister, but was refused due to guest privacy concerns. Later, the Taichung police negotiated with the hotel management and finally obtained information about recent guests. Surprisingly, the guest list included Liang Sihui and her boyfriend Qingyu. Previously, this supposed best friend had claimed she knew nothing about Qin Naomi's whereabouts. How would she explain this now? After obtaining this list, the police searched room 1122 where the couple had stayed. In the bathroom trash can, they found Qin Naomi's transit card, credit card, ID keys, and other personal belongings. Moreover, hotel security footage showed that at 2:39 a.m. on March 2nd, Chengyu had left the hotel room alone and entered a storage room on the same floor. Clearly, he was inextricably linked to this incident. The investigation revealed that Liang Sihui had no criminal record, while Chengyu was a wanted suspect in a rape case by Taipei police. He also had multiple fraud and assault convictions. Despite his extensive criminal history, he had never killed anyone. The police, still hoping Qin Naomi might be alive, arrested both for interrogation. Chengyu claimed that during the daytime photo shoot, Qin Naomi had argued with her boyfriend and, feeling upset, wanted to go out alone to clear her head. He said he didn't know where she went. However, when police questioned Qin Naomi's boyfriend, he stated their relationship was harmonious and they had no conflicts. Later, Chengyu changed his story, saying that after the daytime shoot, Qin Naomi was taken away by a photographer named Zhang Exian, who was in the Zhanghe district of New Taipei City. He claimed he had only taken her forgotten handbag. Police from Taichung and New Taipei quickly coordinated, even driving the suspect north for confrontation. But they discovered this person wasn't a photographer at all, but a friend who had once helped Chengyu. Moreover, he wasn't even in Taiwan, having been in Hangzhou for over 2 months. As time ticked by, the leads kept breaking down. Chengyu's credibility was severely compromised. In a media interview, Qin Naomi's father revealed that his daughter was too trusting. He never imagined she would encounter trouble just months after moving to Taipei to pursue her career. Her mother, unable to hide her grief, said her daughter had appeared in a dream, saying she was in a very dark place, scared, and wanting her family to bring her home soon. To find Qin Naomi's whereabouts as soon as possible, the police changed their interrogation tactics with Chengyu, attempting to break through his psychological defenses. Initially, they tried to persuade him to confess quickly by offering reduced sentences, but he remained unmoved. Left with no choice, the police began describing eerie details from past cases to shake his resolve. As it neared midnight, the police had a sudden idea and said, "Perhaps Qin Naomi is no longer in this world. After midnight, her wronged spirit will come to find you." By this time it was pitch dark, and with the earlier ghost stories, Chengyu finally broke down. Following his directions, police arrived at the Wangxin building in Nangang, Taipei. In a dark, abandoned underground mall, they found the victim's body. Behind a large wooden board, Qin Naomi lay on the floor, her face swollen and red, a belt around her neck, barefoot, with her underwear only loosely covering her. Seeing this tragic scene, the police at the scene were heartbroken. Chengyu confessed that he and Liang Sihui had jointly invited Qin Naomi out. Afterwards, they fled to Taichung and checked into a hotel. He also accused Liang Sihui of being the mastermind, claiming he was only following her instructions. When Liang Sihui heard that Qin Naomi had been killed, she screamed, "How could this happen?" She repeatedly muttered in disbelief. But when she heard Chengyu accusing her of being the mastermind, she became unusually calm and passive, either saying she didn't know or asking the police, "Don't you know how to investigate?" Based on the evidence at the crime scene, a renowned forensic expert made some deductions about the case. He suggested that the victim's underwear had been discarded. If Liang Sihui had been present at the scene, she might have redressed Chin Naomi out of friendship. Additionally, the body showed signs of being dragged. If Liang had been there, she could have helped Chengyu move the body instead of him having to drag it alone. Regarding this, Chengyu stated that Liang Sihui had claimed Chin Naomi had cyberbullied her, so she asked for his help in revenge. During the strangulation and rape, Chin Naomi regained consciousness once and started screaming. Liang allegedly hit her head with a flashlight and told Chengyu to use the handbag strap to strangle her. Unexpectedly, due to excessive force, the victim died of asphyxiation. Chengyu recounted that Liang Sihui was present throughout the entire process, including the initial meeting and dragging the body. At the crime scene, Chin Naomi's underwear was also discarded by her. For a dark underground mall like this, it would be difficult for any girl to come alone with a strange man. But if two girls came together, it would indeed increase the feasibility of the plan. From this perspective, Liang Sihui seemed incredibly cruel, disregarding their friendship and not even leaving the victim with a final shred of dignity. So, who exactly was this Liang Sihui? Liang Sihui, born in Nangang District, Taipei City, was 22 years old in 2010 when she met and became close friends with Chin Naomi. Her father was a retired police officer originally from Guangdong province. He had divorced when younger, leaving a child with his ex-wife. After retirement, he met and married Liang Shihui's mother, and they moved to Taiwan together, where Liang Shihui and her sister were born. Her father had a generous pension, and her mother ran a pastry business, allowing the family to live comfortably. Neighbors knew the family had two beautiful daughters, but noted that the elder daughter, Liang Shihui, didn't like studying. At the time of the incident, she had been expelled from Lingdong University of Science and Technology for failing to register on time. Neighbors also mentioned that the mother-daughter relationship was strained, with frequent arguments heard from their home. Additionally, Liang Sihui's private life was controversial. Some insiders revealed she had worked in the gray industry of hotels. In 2015, she dated a famous Taiwanese blogger, but their relationship was unhappy. After breaking up, they often attacked each other online. Netizens pointed out that this relationship might have sown the seeds of enmity between her and Chin Naomi. However, Liang's manager denied this. 2 years later, Liang Sihui met a new boyfriend and began living with him. This boyfriend was said to be the son of an executive from the luxury brand Cartier, with an impressive background. He even claimed to be a famous photographer nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. This person was Chengyu, the main character in this case. The once loving couple now turned against each other after the incident. Faced with this situation, the police could only continue searching for clues. In the surveillance footage from a convenience store near the crime scene, police discovered some crucial evidence. At 11:46 a.m. on March 1st, a woman wearing a gray coat and hat entered the store. Chengyu identified this woman as Chin Naomi. The footage showed that 2 minutes later, another woman in black and Chengyu also entered. At 12:26 p.m., the two went towards the Wangxiang building. Chengyu claimed the woman with him was Liang Sihui, while Chin Naomi entered from another side door of the building. Police checked the corresponding building surveillance and indeed saw this woman entering the building. On March 4th, after interrogation, the prosecutor's office determined that the couple, Liang and Chung, were suspected of serious crimes including robbery, rape, and murder, with a risk of fleeing or destroying evidence. They immediately submitted a request to the court for their arrest. Although Liang Sihui insisted she wasn't the woman in the surveillance footage and claimed she was at home at the time, there was no one to corroborate her story, so she remained highly suspect. Consequently, the court ordered both to be detained at the Tuching Detention Center. The news of Liang Sihui being suspected of murder shocked her neighbors. Her father, in his 80s, had recently passed away from a heart attack, with the funeral ending less than a month ago. Everyone wondered how such a beautiful young girl could be so ruthless. Public opinion was in uproar, and Liang Sihui faced severe moral condemnation. However, unexpectedly, as more suspicious points about Chengyu were exposed, the case took a major unexpected turn. Remember the photographer Zhang Xian mentioned earlier? His real name was Zhang Longyu, originally a nightclub MC. He took to social media to clarify Chungyu's previous blame-shifting behavior and expose his true nature. Zhang Longyu said that Chungyu claimed to be from a wealthy family, but whenever he said he'd take people to his home, he'd either deliberately drive the wrong way or say he forgot his keys. When going out, he wouldn't bring cash, only an American black card, and when it came time to pay, he'd make excuses that the card couldn't be used there and ask friends to cover the bill. However, according to reports, the luxury car keys and black card he flaunted were fake models bought online. Moreover, he often pretended to be an agent to lure Instagram models out for photo shoots with malicious intent. Zhang Longyu couldn't stand it and would advise against it whenever he discovered this behavior. When his identity was exposed, Chungyu would lie on the living room floor begging to be taken in. Some of the victims' friends revealed that Chungyu had been warned by them several times for fraud years ago, but unexpectedly, he never reformed and eventually committed murder. During the investigation of this case, the Nangang police's description of Chungyu was shocking. In just half a year, he had committed 2 rapes. Astonishingly, one of these previous incidents occurred at the same crime scene, the basement of the Wangxing building, where he had sexually assaulted another victim. According to the investigation, his real name was Gao Tingyu. His parents divorced when he was 9 years old. From a young age, he had a habit of petty theft. His mother constantly had to clean up after his mistakes, and often asked the police to educate him. She even moved house 3 times and changed his name to Chungyu in hopes that her son would reform. However, his mother's efforts had little effect, and the son's path became increasingly wayward. According to Taiwanese media reports, in 2013, Chungyu met a girl named Xiaozi. When they first met, Chungyu threw a pile of cash on the table and told her his company address and car plate number. Xiaozi said she really thought he was from a wealthy family at that time. It's hard to imagine that someone with such sophisticated fraud techniques only had a middle school education. A few months later, a car accident when they were together exposed Chungyu's true face. Xiaozi discovered that the luxury car he claimed was his was actually rented, and he didn't even have a driver's license. Chungyu's mother even called Xiaozi asking her to help pay the fine. This left her stunned. Chungyu also asked her to let him stay, saying his mother had kicked him out and he had nowhere to go. Only then did Xiaozi realize he had nothing. However, even so, he continued to use similar tactics to deceive people for money and love. First, he married a female Uber driver and swindled 500,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately 16,000 US dollars. Then he married his current wife. However, her family became suspicious, confronted him with the police, discovered his numerous criminal records, and immediately filed for divorce. Additionally, a model surnamed Zhang in Taipei also made accusations at that time. She revealed that around Chinese New Year in 2016, Chungyu had actively contacted her on Facebook to buy 3 phones, requesting a face-to-face transaction. However, she was abroad at the time and could only ask someone else to help. Unexpectedly, when Chungyu saw she couldn't come, he immediately canceled the transaction. Ms. Zhang said it was fortunate they didn't meet in person, as the consequences would have been unimaginable. Such a repeat offender who had harmed many people had now conspired to take a life. The couple, Liang Sihui and Chungyu, were described by Taiwanese media as the vicious couple and murderous lovebirds. However, as the investigation deepened, a key piece of evidence revealed the truth of the case. On March 6th, after comparison, the police discovered that the woman initially thought to be Chen Naomi in the side door surveillance of the building was actually a female artist named Huang Jenny who lived in the Wangxing building. Because it was the cold winter season in Taiwan at the time, people were all bundled up. Both women were artists who wore hats and masks when going out, and their figures were quite similar. The police didn't recognize this for a while and were misled by the suspect. To ensure no further mistakes, the police compared Chen Naomi's outfit when she left home with images from surveillance cameras near the crime scene. They discovered that the woman who entered the convenience store and building with Chungyu was not Liang Shihui, but had always been Chen Naomi. Liang Shihui's mother, seeing her daughter attacked online, also sought ways to help. Fortunately, she found crucial evidence supporting her daughter's alibi. She checked the surveillance camera near their home and confirmed that her daughter was at home until 6:20 p.m. before leaving. However, strangely, Liang Shihui's phone location showed she was at the crime scene. Why was this? It turned out that Liang's phone had been lost on the day of her father's funeral. Upon investigation, the police discovered the phone wasn't actually lost, but had been stolen by Chunyu. Furthermore, police found Chun Naomi's watch, phone case, and other personal items at Liang Shihue's home. When questioned, she said all these items were given to her by Chunyu under various pretexts, and she knew nothing about their origin. As the investigation continued, the forensic team sampled shoe prints around the crime scene, and found only Chungyu's footprints, not Liang's. In the stairwell, police also found 2 face masks and an empty water bottle. Chunyu said the masks were worn by him and Liang's, and the water was bought by Liang at the convenience store. If this were true, Liang's DNA should have been present. At the time of the crime, Chunyu said the handbag strap was also used to move the body. The police cut Chun Naomi's fingernails for DNA comparison. After 3 days of waiting, the test results finally revealed the truth. Among all the items tested, no DNA from Liang Sihue was found. This meant only Chunyu was at the crime scene. So why did Chunyu try to implicate Liang Sihue? Chunyu was a frequent visitor to the police station, and this time he was suspected of intentional homicide. Therefore, he was likely to face severe punishment. However, compared to life imprisonment or the death penalty, being charged with instigating murder would reduce the sentence to less than 14 years. Thus, after committing the crime, Chunyu consistently used Liang's texting style to reply to messages from the victim's family and friends, intending to make people think Liang Sihue was the culprit, and he was just an accomplice in an attempt to reduce his sentence. Based on previous investigations, on June 20, 2017, the prosecutor from the Shirlin District Prosecutor's Office stated that Chunyu had repeatedly committed crimes without remorse and had malicious intentions. During his sentence, he would be unlikely to rehabilitate, so it was necessary to permanently isolate him from society. Therefore, they recommended the death penalty for Chunyu. As for Liang Sihue, due to insufficient evidence of crime, she was exempt from prosecution. After confirming the prosecutor's stance, Liang immediately authorized a lawyer to apply for criminal compensation and received 20,000 NTD, approximately US $650 in compensation on December 6, 2017. Her lawyer estimated that if she sued all the internet users who defamed her and won the case, she could receive up to $600 million, approximately US $19.5 million in compensation. However, the final judgment of this case sparked a wave of public controversy. On July 10, 2018, the Shirlin District Court sentenced Chunyu to life imprisonment in the first trial. The reasons for not sentencing him to death were based on 2 points. The reasons for not sentencing Chunyu to death were based on 2 points. Initially, Chunyu only intended to rape Chun Naomi, but when the victim woke up midway and screamed, he feared being discovered and decided to kill her to silence her. Second, the method Chunyu used to kill Chun Naomi was not considered particularly brutal. Regarding the suspect's continuous misleading of the police, the judge considered lying after the fact to be human nature. This verdict caused public outrage. Chunyu escaped the death penalty and even laughed mockingly in court. The victim's family wept bitterly, declaring that even 100 death sentences wouldn't be enough for the murderer. They couldn't accept that the loss of their daughter was deemed not particularly brutal. The Chun family couldn't accept this judgment. Chun Naomi's father also stated that Liang Sihue was the mastermind behind the scenes. Although there was insufficient evidence, he believed she couldn't escape responsibility. In June 2020, during the appeal hearing at the High Court, Chunyu requested a mental evaluation in an attempt to reduce his sentence. However, both the appeal and retrial courts rejected this request, maintaining the original verdict and stripping him of his civil rights for life. On October 15th, the Supreme Court rejected the Chun family's appeal for the death penalty and decided to enforce the life imprisonment sentence. Although the trial of the case has concluded, it has left an indelible impact. First, the controversy surrounding Liang Sihue continues unabated. A few months after the incident, she changed her name and returned to the public eye, starting live streams on platforms and creating a new fan base. Faced with criticism from netizens, she choked back tears, saying she also loved Chun Naomi very much and missed her. When Chun Shaoling, the victim's sister, heard about this, she posted a scathing rebuke, demanding that Liang Sihue stop deceiving and causing trouble. She said if Liang had any conscience left, she should stop talking about her sister. It's clear that the decision to exempt Liang Sihue from prosecution still infuriated the Chin family. Secondly, The systemic loopholes exposed by this case also sparked public dissatisfaction. According to statistics from the Ministry of Justice, in 2017, about 500 rape suspects in Taiwan were still at large, evading the law. Wang Weizhong, then a Taipei city councilor, also questioned the government's ultimate control measures. The health department also admitted that their enforcement power was insufficient and the disciplinary regulations were too lenient. The month of the incident coincided with International Women's Day, and Taiwanese women also called for stronger public power control in civil society. We know that judicial justice is the last line of defense in upholding social justice. Although the trial results of this case were not as expected, the fact that the perpetrator could repeatedly deceive people for money and love, and even take a life over several years, is inseparable from the imperfection of the social supervision mechanism. However, it's worth noting that after this case, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense revised the criminal law, strengthening the sentencing for rape cases. Story 3. This case takes place in Nagasaki and Saga prefectures, two neighboring prefectures located in the northwest of Kyushu Island, Japan. In the city of Kashima, in southern Saga prefecture, a family of 5 lived in a house in the Koshi area. The husband, Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, 36, worked for a telecommunications company. His wife, Reiko Yamaguchi, 33, was a housewife. They had 3 children. Their eldest son, who was 13 years old, their second son, who was 10 years old, and their daughter, who was 4 years old. The seemingly peaceful life of this family was suddenly turned upside down by an unexpected event. In the early hours of September 11, 1992, in the Tara area of Saga Prefecture, a chaotic scene unfolded. A woman in a state of panic ran to the front door of a house, frantically banging on it while screaming, "Help, my husband fell into the sea." The desperate cry for help woke the homeowners from their deep sleep. They hurriedly opened the door to find a woman in soaking wet clothes trembling before them. Upon grasping the situation, the homeowners immediately called the police and mobilized local fishermen to search the sea area for the victim. The woman who had knocked on the door was Reiko Yamaguchi. Her husband loved night fishing and often invited her to join him at the sea. Around 8 p.m. that evening, they had gone to a seawall on the Tara coast. While fishing, they had argued over a minor issue, causing Reiko to walk away in sadness. By dawn, when she had calmed down and returned to the seawall, she discovered her husband had vanished, leaving only a fishing rod behind. Fearing he might have fallen into the sea, she rushed to a nearby house to seek help. After receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene. However, due to the darkness, they couldn't immediately find the victim. The fishermen involved in the search also couldn't detect anything. A while later, the police finally found Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's body near the sea bottom with no signs of life. Upon preliminary examination, there were no apparent wounds on the victim's body, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The time of death was estimated to be around 2 a.m. The police didn't conduct a detailed autopsy and concluded it was an accident. The death of her husband left Reiko Yamaguchi feeling extremely sorrowful. With 3 school-aged children, the burden of life now weighed heavily on her shoulders. Reiko's dire circumstances evoked sympathy and compassion from many people. Reiko Yamaguchi was born in Saga Prefecture, Japan. She was the youngest child in her family. Her father was a police officer with a hot temper who often beat and scolded his wife and children. Her mother always endured her husband's bad temper patiently. Reiko grew up in this less than harmonious family environment. After graduating from high school, she attended a nursing college. Upon graduating at the age of 20, she began working as an intern nurse at a local hospital. By chance, Reiko met Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, who was 3 years her senior. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they became a couple. After 6 months, they met each other's families and prepared for marriage. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's family had a distant relative, an 89-year-old man living alone in the Koshi area of Kashima City. The old man offered to adopt Katsuhiko on the condition that he would take care of him in his old age in exchange for leaving his house and land to Katsuhiko after his death. Upon hearing this proposal, Katsuhiko immediately agreed, as it was a good opportunity when he was preparing to marry and needed a house. After Katsuhiko Yamaguchi and Reiko got married, they moved in with the old man. Reiko quit her job at the hospital to become a housewife, taking care of her husband and the old man. The couple had a clear division of labor. One would take care of household matters, while the other would handle social affairs. From 1980 to 1988, the couple had 3 children. During this time, the old man passed away due to illness. The couple inherited his property, making their life more comfortable. However, the good times didn't last long. The Yamaguchi family's life gradually fell into a spiral of difficulties when Katsuhiko became addicted to gambling. Although he worked for a telecommunications company, his income was not enough to cover his increasingly expensive habit. The inherited assets, which should have been a springboard for the family's life, were quickly squandered by him. All the land was sold, and debts piled up. The family's life became increasingly difficult. In these dire circumstances, Reiko Yamaguchi remained patient. She didn't complain about her husband, instead devotedly taking care of their 3 children and taking on part-time jobs to make ends meet. However, her silent sacrifice seemed insufficient to maintain her husband's affection. The family tragedy became even more bitter when, not long after their youngest daughter was born, Katsuhiko had an affair. Not wanting her children to lose their father figure, Reiko had to turn a blind eye to her husband's infidelity. However, Katsuhiko became increasingly brazen in his extramarital relationship. He often went on dates with his mistress, sometimes absent from home for days, leaving his wife and children in both material and emotional deprivation. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's mistress was named Kyoko, a married woman who had worked in a bar. She knew how to manipulate men's. Katsuhiko was quickly captivated by Kyoko's gentle and seductive demeanor. He willingly spent lavishly on his new lover, despite his family's tight financial situation. Meanwhile, Kyoko cleverly concealed this extramarital relationship from her husband, Shota. She and Katsuhiko often met secretly and went to karaoke. Later, Kyoko and her husband, Shota, planned to open an izakaya, a type of Japanese bar in Kashima City, but were still short 1.2 million yen, approximately $11,000 in capital. Kyoko asked Katsuhiko for help. Without hesitation, Katsuhiko decided to contribute the full amount. Thanks to this, the izakaya opened smoothly. Katsuhiko became a regular customer at the bar, but his purpose was not to drink, but to meet privately with Kyoko. Although they frequently met at the bar, Kyoko's husband, Shota, remained unaware of this. In April 1990, Kyoko divorced her husband, Shota, but they continued to manage the izakaya together. This created favorable conditions for Katsuhiko to frequent the bar more often, to the point where it almost became his second home. Finally, Shota noticed something unusual. He began to suspect that Kyoko had been having an affair before the divorce. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, and he decided to go to Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's house to demand 1.5 million yen, about $13,600 in compensation. Unexpectedly, Katsuhiko agreed immediately. At this point, Shota suddenly realized that the amount he had demanded was too little compared to the actual damage. Meanwhile, he happened to see Reiko Yamaguchi in a corner of the house. Her short hair and beautiful, delicate face caught Shota's attention. Reiko exuded the gentle demeanor of a devoted wife, an ideal model in Shota's eyes. Suddenly, a dark idea arose in his mind, to take Katsuhiko's wife as a form of revenge. Afterward, Shota began frequently making harassing phone calls to Reiko Yamaguchi. She told her husband about this, but he didn't care, and continued to meet his mistress every day. Once, when Katsuhiko was with Kyoko, Shota called again to arrange a meeting with Reiko to discuss compensation once more. To avoid further phone harassment, Reiko decided to meet him to resolve the issue once and for all. Unexpectedly, when they met, Shota forcibly took Reiko to a hotel, despite her fierce resistance. Under Shota's threats, Reiko was compelled to reluctantly have relations with him. Not stopping there, Shota took intimate photos of Reiko and used them as a tool to blackmail her into continuing their relationship, threatening to make the photos public if she refused. Feeling hurt and humiliated, Reiko went to her husband to tell him everything that had happened. She hoped Katsuhiko would end his relationship with Kyoko and protect her from Shota's harassment. However, Katsuhiko's reaction left Reiko even more desperate. He was not only indifferent, but also thought Reiko was too sensitive and couldn't handle a little difficulty. He even had the twisted thought that, since he had a relationship with Kyoko, it wasn't a big deal for his wife to compensate Shota. Reiko was shocked by her husband's words, but in this dire situation, she had to accept her fate, reluctantly falling into a complex four-way relationship. Later, Shota demanded that Reiko Yamaguchi come to work at his izakaya and promised to pay her a monthly salary. However, Reiko refused because she felt embarrassed to face Kyoko. But Shota didn't care. He still insisted that she come to work, saying her husband had already agreed. In the following days, Reiko Yamaguchi had to go to the izakaya almost every day to work. She gradually became numb to seeing her husband being affectionate with another woman. She no longer hoped her husband would change, and only wanted to work hard to support her children. Reiko didn't want her children to know about their father's affair, so she suggested to her husband that they maintain the appearance of a normal couple at home, not letting the children notice anything. Her husband verbally agreed, but still frequently beat and scolded her, showing no marital affection. For the sake of her children, Reiko Yamaguchi had to endure. However, she never expected that just a year later, her husband would drown in the sea. When the incident occurred, Reiko no longer had any feelings for her husband, but she didn't want her children to lose their father. After her husband's death, the burden of raising the children fell heavily on her shoulders alone. Fortunately, all 3 children were well behaved, which provided her with some consolation. Not long after this tragedy, misfortune struck the family again. 6 years after Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's death, in the early hours of October 27, 1998, Reiko Yamaguchi suddenly ran into a convenience store in Kanagai Town, Nagasaki Prefecture, in a state of panic. She said that her second son, Toshitaka Yamaguchi, had been squid fishing at a nearby port when he slipped and fell into the sea. The store clerk immediately called the police upon hearing this. The Nagasaki Prefectural Police, after receiving the report, notified the Kanagai Town Fishery Association to send boats to the Jishir port for rescue. After 40 minutes of searching, they found Toshitaka Yamaguchi's body about 164 feet from the port. However, the police quickly became suspicious because Toshitaka's body was wrapped in a lot of tape. If the boy had really slipped and fallen into the water by accident, how could there be tape on his body? It seemed like this was someone's deliberate action. When she saw her son's body being pulled up, Reiko Yamaguchi appeared extremely distraught. However, the experienced police officers realized that the woman before them was not as simple as she appeared. They began to interrogate her. Reiko Yamaguchi stated that her second son was in middle school and had excellent academic performance. He had an older brother and had passed away 6 years ago. The family of 4 was living in Saga Prefecture. Around 10:30 p.m. the previous night, Toshitaka had said that the pressure of studying was too great recently, so he wanted to go fishing to relax and asked his mother to take him to Kanagai port to catch squid. By dawn, the boy had slipped and fallen into the water. It was very dark at the time, so visibility was poor. Reiko Yamaguchi had tried to use a tree branch to pull her son up, but failed. Unable to swim, in her panic, she ran to a nearby convenience store for help. The police were skeptical of Reiko Yamaguchi's statement. Since the incident didn't occur on a weekend, and there was school the next day, it seemed unreasonable for her son to ask his mother to take him fishing late at night. Moreover, they were living in Saga Prefecture while the port was in Nagasaki Prefecture, about 12.4 miles apart. If they really wanted to relax by fishing, they could have easily done so in Saga Prefecture. So why go so far? Furthermore, October is not the squid fishing season, which is basic knowledge for people living near the sea. Therefore, the police believed that this case certainly had some hidden aspects. Subsequently, they decided to conduct an autopsy on Toshitaka's body. The forensic results showed that there were sedatives in the victim's stomach, no apparent wounds on the body, and the cause of death was drowning. The time of death was estimated to be around 1 a.m. on October 27th. From this point, the police suspected that Reiko Yamaguchi was likely the main culprit. They speculated that she had secretly given her son sedatives, waited until the boy was sound asleep, then used tape to bind his hands and feet before throwing him into the sea, staging the scene to look like an accidental drowning. But why would Reiko Yamaguchi want to kill her own son? The police quickly discovered that Reiko had purchased a large accident insurance policy for her second son, with herself as the beneficiary. According to the insurance terms, if her son died in an accident, she would receive a very large compensation payment. The police also discovered that 6 years ago, Reiko's husband had also drowned under suspicious circumstances. At that time, she had received 100 million yen, about $907,000, in insurance money. Therefore, they suspected that Reiko had carefully planned both cases to defraud the insurance company. because the Saga Prefectural Police had not thoroughly investigated the cause of Reiko's death 6 years ago. Some suspicious points had been overlooked. Now, the police found the person who had helped Reiko report the incident 6 years ago to ask for more details. The person who reported the incident recalled that at that time, Reiko had come knocking on their door at midnight, appearing very agitated and saying that her husband had fallen into the sea. The strange thing was that it hadn't been raining that day, but her entire body was soaking wet. She had said that she couldn't swim, so she had come to ask for help. So why was she wet? This made people suspicious. Next, the police sought out the fishermen who had participated in the search that year. Surprisingly, all of them believed that the incident that year was certainly not a simple accident, and it had many suspicious points. After receiving the news that someone had fallen into the sea, the fishermen had driven their boats to the area where the incident occurred. On the seawall, there was only a fishing rod stuck there with no bait, tackle box, or any other fishing equipment. It didn't look like the gear of a real fisherman, but rather like someone who didn't know much about fishing had deliberately placed it there. After the victim's body was recovered, they had told the police about their suspicions, but were ignored. The police hadn't even conducted a basic investigation before hastily concluding it was an accident. In fact, the police that year had also discovered some unusual points. For example, at the time of the incident, it was low tide with shallow water. The location where the victim fell into the water wasn't deep enough to cause drowning. Even if someone had accidentally fallen in, they could have easily waded to shore. Additionally, the seabed was full of sharp rocks, and if someone had really fallen, they would likely have been scratched. However, there were no wounds on the victim's body. Based on the newly collected evidence, the police believed that the case from 6 years ago might not have been an accident, and Reiko Yamaguchi was the prime suspect in the case. Next, they interviewed some neighbors to understand the daily life situation of this family. A neighbor said Toshitaka was a well-behaved, studious child who always took the initiative to greet people politely. However, for some unknown reason, the boy's face was often injured, and he even had a broken nose once. When people asked out of concern, the boy stammered that he had gotten into fights with his siblings at home and accidentally got hurt. The neighbor suspected it was caused by his mother's boyfriend. That man had a hot temper and often abused the children, especially Toshitaka. Another neighbor told the police he often saw Yamaguchi Toshitaka studying under a street light or in front of a vending machine when he returned from night shifts. Sometimes he even saw the boy walking the dog at midnight, even when it was raining. The neighbor vaguely felt that the boy was in trouble, but whenever he asked if the boy needed any help, he always refused. During the investigation, the police also learned that Toshitaka's family was very poor. His mother's boyfriend often beat and scolded the children. Reiko Yamaguchi should have received a large insurance payout after her husband's death, enough for the whole family to live comfortably. So why were they living in such poverty? To find the answer to this question, the police investigated the background of Reiko Yamaguchi's boyfriend. This man's name was Keo Sodu, 51 years old, with no stable job and living by deceiving others. He was very skilled at manipulating women's feelings, luring them into his trap, and then swindling their money to spend. He was addicted to gambling, spending any money he had on gambling until he lost it all. The police suspected that Reiko Yamaguchi might have been psychologically manipulated by Keo Sodo, and all the insurance money had fallen into his hands. Therefore, they sought out Keo for investigation. Soon after, under police pressure, he confessed to all his crimes. Keo Sodo was born in Fujitsu County, Saga Prefecture. He was the youngest of 5 siblings, with 1 older brother and 3 older sisters. His mother died early, and his father raised the 5 children alone. Keo was mischievous and destructive from a young age, always at the bottom of his class academically. In high school, he befriended delinquents and expelled before graduation. Afterward, Keo went to Tokyo alone to make a living. He found work as a truck driver and part-time at a bowling alley. At 26, Keo got married. The couple lived in Kanagawa Prefecture and had 3 children. Life seemed stable. However, after just 3 short years, Keo became addicted to gambling, losing all their savings and accumulating millions of yen in debt. By the age of 30, Keo found a new job as a bus driver in Kanagawa Prefecture, but it still wasn't enough to cover expenses. Gradually, his temper became irritable, beating his wife and children at the slightest provocation. In May 1984, his wife, unable to bear such a life anymore, divorced him and took their 3 children. For years later, Keo was fired for causing an accident while driving a bus. Not only did he lose his job, but he also had people constantly coming to collect debts, forcing him to hide everywhere. That same year, his father passed away due to illness. Keo took this opportunity to return to his home in Saga Prefecture and take over the store his father had run. However, Keo was still addicted to gambling, and all the store's money was gambled away. In 1990, Keo's older brother also died from illness, and his 3 older sisters successively developed mental illnesses requiring long-term hospitalization. Keo became the only normal person in the family. After his sisters fell ill, they each received a monthly disability allowance. This money, of course, fell into Soda's hands. Additionally, he received the allowances for his deceased parents. In fact, these amounts were entirely sufficient for him to live on, but he gambled it all away. Later, he even mortgaged the house to borrow money from the bank. For a long time, Keo began dating many women. Whenever he had the chance, he would borrow money from them, promising to repay double in the future. These women were often deceived by his sweet talk, willingly giving him all their savings to spend. Keo relied on these fraudulent methods to barely maintain his lifestyle. At the end of 1991, through an acquaintance's introduction, Keo went to drink at the izakaya where Reiko Yamaguchi worked and happened to meet her. Afterward, he frequently came to the bar. Reiko Yamaguchi also had feelings for him. Gradually, they became a couple, until one day in 1992, Reiko Yamaguchi suddenly said she wanted to eliminate her husband and hoped Keo could help. She promised to share half of the insurance money with him after succeeding. Initially, Keo didn't want to do this because he knew it was a crime. But because he desperately needed money, he finally agreed to help. At around 8 p.m. on September 10, 1992, Reiko Yamaguchi put sedatives in her husband's curry rice. After eating, he fell asleep. Then, Keo helped take the husband to a seawall in the Terra area. During this process, he felt some regret and wanted to give up, but Reiko Yamaguchi threatened. If he didn't help, she would put all the blame on him. Reluctantly, Keo could only follow her instructions. Keo pushed Katsuhiko into the sea. Afterward, Reiko stuck a fishing rod on the seawall, then pretended to run to a nearby house for help. Keo fled the scene. Unfortunately, the police didn't investigate thoroughly, so they successfully received the insurance money. After Katsuhiko's death, Keo moved in to live with Reiko Yamaguchi. Thanks to the insurance money, their life was quite comfortable. Reiko Yamaguchi then quit her job at the izakaya to become a housewife. However, within just 6 years, they had spent all the insurance money. Therefore, Reiko Yamaguchi came up with her old idea again. She wanted to KO Suru to defraud the insurance company. One day, when the 3 children were not at home, she secretly put sedatives in the food. After KO ate and fell into a deep sleep, she planned to light a cigarette and place it on flammable material in the house, wanting to disguise it as an accidental fire. However, KO luckily escaped death because the cigarette went out halfway through burning. When he woke up, he realized something was wrong, but didn't dare report it to the police for fear of exposing the previous case. He could only endure it, pretending nothing had happened. When the plan failed, Reiko Yamaguchi turned her attention to her second son. She had bought insurance for all 3 children before, but was still hesitant about which one to choose. Finally, she chose the most obedient child, Toshitaka. This time, Reiko still asked Keo Soto for help. Threatened by her, he reluctantly agreed. At 10:30 p.m. that night, Reiko Yamaguchi lured her second son to Kanagai Port in Nagasaki Prefecture to catch squid. Then, she gave him a sedative. At 12:30 a.m., while the boy was sound asleep, she used tape to bind his hands and feet. Then she asked Keo Soto to help throw him into the sea. Unexpectedly, as soon as he fell into the water, Yamaguchi Toshitaka suddenly woke up. The boy knew how to swim, so he quickly struggled free from the tape and swam towards the shore, shouting, "You bastards." As he swam, Keo Soto then jumped into the water to subdue the boy. Reiko Yamaguchi knelt on the port, frantically pushing her son's head underwater until he stopped moving. Keo Soto continued to testify to the police that it was all Reiko Yamaguchi's plan. He was just helping. Afterward, Keo also felt very remorseful. Every night when he slept, he seemed to see Yamaguchi Toshitaka's face. He had thought about confessing, but ultimately lacked the courage. A year after the incident occurred, the police arrested Reiko Yamaguchi on charges of premeditated murder. At the same time, they conducted a thorough search of her house. As a result, they didn't find any sedatives, but they discovered a graduation memory book from Toshitaka's elementary school. It was full of words of gratitude for his mother, and he hoped that, when he entered middle school, his mother would still take care of him as before. The boy could never have imagined that the mother he cherished would later become a demon who killed her own child with her own hands. The police interrogated Reiko Yamaguchi. She admitted to killing her ex-husband, but said it was entirely his own fault. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi was an extremely selfish person who didn't care about her and the children, and even had an affair, ultimately leading to his mistress's husband coming to their home. Reiko initially didn't want to get involved in these troublesome matters, and only wanted to raise her 3 children well. But unexpectedly, Shota, the husband of the mistress, wouldn't let her go and forced her to have sexual relations. This was a great humiliation for her. What angered her more was that Katsuhiko Yamaguchi was indifferent to this, and only cared about enjoying himself with his mistress. By 1992, her husband had actively proposed divorce to marry his mistress. The other woman even instigated Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's mother to come to their house and persuade Reiko to voluntarily give up custody of their 3 children. This was something she could no longer bear. Reiko Yamaguchi said she had long lost any feelings for Katsuhiko Yamaguchi. They were just living together to get by. Since he had been so heartless, she had nothing to be afraid of anymore. Before the divorce, she decided to end everything. Initially, Reiko had approached Shota for help, but he was too cowardly to do it. Then she met Keo Soto. They had known each other since 1991. Keo was someone who knew how to comfort her, and always tried to make her happy. When Reiko told him about her plan, Keo was very supportive and decided to act immediately. Afterward, he even proactively used his connections with the underworld to help her escape Soto's harassment. Reiko Yamaguchi was very moved by Soto's actions. Therefore, she entrusted him with managing all 100 million yen, about $907,000 of the insurance money. When he got this money, Keo Soto immediately paid off 30 million yen, about $272,000 of his previous gambling debts. He also gambled away the remaining money. By July 1993, he only had a few 10,000 yen left from the insurance money. The family's life once again faced financial problems. Reiko Yamaguchi had to take on part-time jobs outside to have money for household expenses. However, the money she earned was far from enough. Therefore, Keo Soto came up with the idea of insurance fraud again. This time, he targeted Toshitaka, Reiko's second son. Reiko Yamaguchi initially strongly opposed this, but Keo Soto was too greedy to listen to her advice. Under his constant persuasion, Reiko began to waver. One day she tried to give her son sedatives, then closed the room and opened the gas valve, intentionally creating an accident. But in the end, unable to bear the torment of her conscience, she told her eldest son about this. The eldest son, upon hearing this, quickly rushed home and opened the windows, luckily avoiding a tragedy. After this incident, Reiko Yamaguchi decided to eliminate Keo Soto, but was unsuccessful. When Keo learned about this, he had a big argument with Reiko, causing the relationship between them to become very tense. Reiko Yamaguchi suggested robbing an old lady. She was a woman who lived alone, with her children all working in big cities. Reiko had once done cleaning work at this old lady's house, which was in a luxurious villa in Saga Prefecture. At around 8 p.m. one day in September 1998, Keo Soto wore a mask and carried a knife to break into the old lady's house. After 7 hours of threats, he managed to rob 137,000 yen, about $1,240 in cash, and 6 jewelry necklaces worth 1.2 million yen, about $1,240, $10,900. Because the old lady's house didn't have security cameras, the police couldn't trace Keo Soto. Although this robbery was quite successful, the money was quickly spent. Keo Soto again came up with the idea of insurance money. He continuously persuaded Reiko Yamaguchi to act against her second son, and promised that after this time, he would stop, no longer gamble, and live a good life. Reiko Yamaguchi was once again swayed by Keo's sweet words, and then the scene of her taking her son to the sea occurred, as previously described. Reiko Yamaguchi said that she was originally a person without strong opinions. It was under the constant urging of others that she did such wrongful things. The police approached Shota and asked why he knew about Reiko Yamaguchi's plan, but didn't report it to the police. Shota said he was threatened by Keo Soto. Keo had connections with the underworld, so he was afraid. If he spoke out about it, he would be the next to suffer. Therefore, Shota didn't dare report to the police. Moreover, the person killed was Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, which was a good thing for him. He still had feelings for his ex-wife, Kyoko, and this was an opportunity for him to reconcile with her. Afterward, the police met with Reiko Yamaguchi's eldest son and youngest daughter to gather more information. Both children reported that they had been given sedatives. The eldest son told the police mother had bought insurance for him worth 40 million yen, about $363,000, and for his younger sister worth 25 million yen, about $227,000. If the police didn't intervene and investigate this time, the next person thrown into the sea could be them. The two siblings continued to say that Keo Soda had a hot temper. Since he moved in to live with them, their family life had become tense, with almost daily violence and arguments. Their mother listened to Soto a lot, and her attitude towards the children was no longer the same as before. In fact, the two children had long known that their mother and Keo Soto had bad intentions, but they still didn't want to report to the police. After all, their mother had worked hard to raise them, and perhaps she had only done wrong things because of instigation. It was all Keo Soto's fault. When this news was published, people were shocked by the behavior of a mother killing her own child to defraud insurance money. They couldn't believe there could be such a mother in the world, and unanimously condemned Reiko Yamaguchi and Keo Soto. 2 years after the incident, the trial was held at the Nagasaki District Court. The defendants Reiko Yamaguchi and Keo Soto were charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, fraud, and robbery. Both pleaded guilty, but didn't admit to being the mastermind, instead blaming each other. At the court, defendant Reiko Yamaguchi cried, saying that the planner for both cases was Keo Soto. If she didn't follow his instructions, she would be subjected to violence. Faced with Reiko Yamaguchi's defense, the prosecutor argued that this was an extremely selfish act, and using children as sacrifices was unacceptable. The crime of severing family ties was unforgivable. The prosecutor demanded the death penalty for both defendants. The judge declared in court for the murder of Katsuhiko Yamaguchi. The defendant, Reiko Yamaguchi, must bear primary responsibility. For the murder of Yamaguchi Toshitaka, both defendants are equally responsible. They committed the crime together, so there is no distinction in the severity of their punishment. In January 2003, after 32 court sessions, the court delivered its verdict. Defendants Reiko Yamaguchi and Keo Soto were found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated murder, fraud, robbery, and other charges. Both were sentenced to death. However, the defense lawyers disagreed with this verdict and appealed to the Fukuoka High Court. 6 years after the incident occurred, the appeal trial was held. The eldest son and youngest daughter of defendant Reiko Yamaguchi submitted a petition for leniency for their mother. Meanwhile, defendant Keo Soda said he sympathized with Reiko Yamaguchi's circumstances, which is why he cooperated in killing her ex-husband. Afterward, the idea of killing the second son was also Reiko's. He only participated in the execution. Keo hoped the court could consider leniency and uphold the death sentence for him. After consideration, the court made a final decision to overturn the death sentence for defendant Reiko Yamaguchi and replace it with life imprisonment. For defendant Keo Soto, the court maintained the original sentence. The story of Reiko Yamaguchi is a heartbreaking tragedy, reflecting the dark sides of society and human nature. From a happy family, they fell into a spiral of crime, deception, and violence. This case is also a warning about the importance of love and respect within the family. When these values are eroded, tragedy can occur at any time. Story 4. In a suburban town near Los Angeles, California, people asleep in their homes were suddenly awakened by a series of gunshots and the cries of children in the middle of the night. A family tragedy was unfolding. How could a home that should have been filled with joy and warmth turn into a horrifying crime scene? Who is the person behind this brutal act? Today's case involves a Chinese-American family, but with a slight twist. The husband was a Chinese-American who immigrated to the U.S. with his parents as a child. The wife, originally from China, had attended university and worked in her home country. Through the arrangement of his parents, this beautiful woman married her current husband, and they had children together. However, behind the appearance of a harmonious family, a quiet crisis was brewing. When the wife's parents came from afar to visit, they had no idea this would mark the end of their lives. To understand the full scope of this case, we need to rewind back to 2016. The crime scene was located in West Covina, California. about 19 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. Around 8:30 p.m. on April 13, 2016, gunshots suddenly rang out on a quiet street. Several local residents who heard the shots called 911. One of them reported hearing more than 20 gunshots and the sounds of children crying and screaming, which sounded extremely distressing. Another resident said he not only heard gunfire and children's screams, but also knew the incident was happening in a neighboring townhouse across the street. He saw a man pacing back and forth on the second floor of the house before the man closed the blinds and turned off the room's lights. The police quickly pinpointed the crime scene based on the reports. A townhouse in the 1300 block of East Oahu Street. By around 8:55 p.m., 2 officers knocked on the door of the house. A man came downstairs from the upper floor to open the door for the police. However, during the conversation, the officers noticed something off about him. He appeared extremely frightened and was speaking incoherently. As a result, the officers called for backup, arrested the man, and handcuffed him. The officers then entered the house to investigate. One officer kicked down the door to the downstairs bathroom and discovered the children, trembling and huddled together in obvious shock. The youngest child had large red stains on both their body and pajamas. Other officers headed upstairs and found a woman at the top of the stairs near the master bedroom. Her body lay on the right-hand hallway outside the bedroom, showing no signs of life. She had been shot in the face, causing brain matter to scatter across the floor and even splatter onto the wall behind her. Police found a tooth and a spent bullet casing on the stairs leading to the second floor. Lying in the hallway nearby was an elderly man, his body covered in dried blood. Based on the shape and angle of the blood spatter, forensic experts concluded that the victim was lying on the floor when he was shot. 2 bullets were embedded in the hardwood floor beneath the body, while others, after passing through the victim, punctured the ceiling of the floor below. To the left of the man's body was a knife. Its position was odd, as if it had been deliberately placed there like a prop. Even stranger, in the midst of this bloody, gruesome scene, the knife was completely clean, without a single stain. The overall scene was both horrifying and bizarre. Next, the officers entered the master bedroom. Inside the closet, they discovered several firearms, including handguns, rifles, and boxes of ammunition, a small arsenal. Among them was a .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, which had been fired 10 times and was now empty. A nearby spare magazine, also for 10 rounds, contained only 1 remaining bullet. Ballistics analysis later confirmed that this was the murder weapon. The crime scene was so horrific that even the officers were stunned. The man was swiftly taken to the police station for questioning. But what was the relationship between this man and the victims? What had happened that night? The man taken into custody was the homeowner, Kaminaro Wong. His wife's name was Jiaoli. They had married in 2007 and had 3 children. The children hiding in the bathroom during the crime were their own, an 8-year-old daughter and 2 sons, aged 6 and 3. At the time of the incident, Wong's wife had been at work, narrowly escaping the tragedy. The elderly couple who were the victims were Zhao Li's parents, Mr. Zhao, age 60, and Mrs. Zhang, also 60 years old. In other words, it was Wong who brutally killed his in-laws. But what could have driven him to commit such a bold and horrific act? Why did he abandon everything and embark on this irreversible path? Police believe the motive for the crime may have stemmed from the couple's marriage. According to police investigations, Wong was born in 1972 as the only child in his family. Originally from Chengdu, Sichuan province. His father was an aerospace expert at a university in Beijing, and his mother was a high school teacher. As a child, attended school in Beijing. His classmates recalled that he was tall and skinny, with an introverted and timid personality. After moving to the U.S. with his parents, Wong studied at Pasadena City College in Los Angeles, later transferring to California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. This university isn't widely known internationally, but its local employment rate for graduates is much higher than some prestigious schools. Apple's first CFO, a former VP at Oracle, and Yahoo CTO are all alumni. It was also ranked 14th among universities preferred by Silicon Valley tech employers, surpassing Cornell, the University of Washington in Seattle, and MIT. Wong majored in electrical engineering there. During his time at school, he developed a love for soccer and changed his name to Caminero in honor of his favorite Spanish player. His classmates described him as quiet and reserved. After graduating, landed his first job at an observatory in New Mexico. The work at the observatory was quite monotonous, and because Wang wasn't great at socializing, he didn't make many friends locally. Gradually, he began to take an interest in guns as a hobby. Over time, his gun collection grew. Around the year 2000, after gaining some work experience, Wang moved to California and secured a job at Boeing as an engineer, working on military satellites with an annual salary of over $80,000, quite a lucrative amount at the time. 2 years later, Wang transitioned to Northrop Grumman, the fourth largest military equipment manufacturer in the world, as a test engineer, and his annual salary rose to about $100,000. It was arguably the peak of Wang's career. However, despite his career success, Wang's parents felt something was still missing. He was over 30 years old and still hadn't started a family. So, like many traditional Chinese families, Wang's parents began searching for a marriage partner for him. They reached out to friends and relatives, looking for a suitable single woman. They even returned to their hometown of Chengdu to find a wife for their son. Around 2005 to 2006, they introduced Wang to Jiaoli, the daughter of a longtime family friend, who was 9 years younger than him. Jiaoli, born in 1981, graduated with a degree in nursing from Sichuan Medical University. After graduation, she worked as a nurse at Huaxi Hospital. Jiaoli had fair skin and was tall, resembling her mother. Neighbors remembered her as a gentle, well-educated, hard-working, and quick-witted young woman. With her medical background and youth, if she could obtain a registered nurse license in the U.S., Jiaoli's income wouldn't be insignificant. If she and Wang were to marry, it seemed like a good match, and their future life together promised to be prosperous and diverse. So, with their parents' matchmaking, in 2006, after knowing each other for only a month, they registered their marriage in China. After the wedding, Wang returned to the U.S. to continue working, while Jiaoli remained in China to apply for a visa, allowing her to live in the U.S. It took almost another year, but in 2007, Jiaoli finally came to the U.S. on a marriage-based green card. The newlyweds quickly started their new life together. After arriving in the U.S., Jiaoli lived with Wang's parents in El Monte, where his parents had bought a house. Initially, Jiaoli attended a community college and later interned at a local medical center, obtaining her nursing license in 2011. In theory, both had decent-paying jobs, and their life seemed to be towards a bright future. However, Wang did not allow Jiaoli to work. He insisted that she stay home, do household chores, and prepare to have children. Jiaoli, obedient and without much complaint, followed her husband's arrangements and stayed home. Soon after, they had children, one every 2 years, and eventually they had 3 children. This clearly showed that Jiaoli was committed to making the marriage work. From the outside, everyone believed that the couple had a perfect marriage. However, while this marriage may have seemed like a good match in the eyes of others, in terms of age, appearance, and personality, Jiaoli clearly had more advantages over her husband. She had a registered nursing license, while Wang, aside from having a good job, mainly benefited from being a U.S. citizen. It was apparent that this marriage was based on an exchange of benefits. A friend of Wang bluntly said, this was a transactional marriage. As a result, their emotional foundation was fragile, and their understanding of each other was shallow. After marriage, Wang and Jiaoli's life together wasn't as sweet or happy as it appeared. In fact, their relationship could be described as strained. Exhibited an extreme desire to control his wife, a level of control that was unsettling and at times frightening. He only allowed his wife to stay at home to take care of the household chores and their children. Wang managed all the family's finances by himself. Jiaoli was only given a credit card for daily purchases, and every item bought or expense had to be reported to Wang. Even when Jiaoli communicated with her family in China via WeChat, Wang monitored her. His obsessive control over her was so extreme that, since he wasn't fluent in Chinese, he only allowed her to make voice calls to her family and forbade texting. Wang attempted to control his wife in these ways. If his control measures didn't work, he would become enraged and treat Jiaoli even worse. The birth of their 3 children and years of living together did nothing to improve their relationship. Arguments became a daily occurrence in their marriage. These arguments didn't stem from typical marital conflicts, but entirely from Wang's inability to control his temper. He would fly into a rage at any moment, anywhere, for no reason at all. According to Jiaoli, during each argument, Wang would shout profanities, mixing both Chinese and English, cursing humanity and the world itself. The worst part was that Wang often threatened to kill her parents in China. and claimed he would make sure the police never found their bodies. Wang tried to tighten his control over Jiaoli through these threats, but when he realized his wasn't falling under his control as he wished, he became even more unhinged. The root cause lay in his past romantic failures before the marriage. The fact that his marriage had been arranged by his parents only deepened his sense of inadequacy. Having been without a girlfriend for many years, Wang was acutely aware that in his marriage to the young and beautiful Jiaoli, she hadn't married him out of love or attraction. Even Wang's parents and friends had subtly warned or hinted that he needed to keep a tight grip on his attractive younger wife. As a result, Wang resorted to controlling Jiaoli within the narrow confines of their household. He believed that by doing so, he could keep her in line. However, this was far from the truth. Over time, Wang's verbal abuse escalated into physical violence. By this point, his actions had evolved beyond mere domestic abuse. However, Jiaoli continued to endure Wang until a more serious incident of domestic violence occurred. In February 2013, Jiaoli was sitting on the couch feeding their 6-month-old son. She asked Wang if he could wash the dishes. Wang angrily replied that he didn't know how to wash dishes. The argument escalated, and once again Wang threatened, "I will kill your parents." This time, Jiaoli had enough and shouted back at him. In response, Wang suddenly grabbed her by the hair and punched her hard in the left temple. Wang's father, seeing his son lose control again, immediately grabbed him tightly. Jiaoli got up from the floor and called 911 to report the incident to the police. When the police arrived, they found blood on the floor and Jiaoli had visible injuries on her face. As a result, Wang was arrested. Not long after, Jiaoli left the U.S. with their children. Before leaving, she demanded that Wang sell the house in El Monte, take half of the sale proceeds amounting to $100,000, and requested $2,000 per month in child support. At that time, was in no position to refuse his wife's demands, as she used dropping the domestic violence charges as leverage. After selling the house, Wang's parents, disappointed and angry, returned to Chengdu. From then on, Wang found himself with nothing, forced to rent a place to live. His arrest record and being fired made it extremely difficult for Wang to find a job. Eventually, he ended up working as a test technician at a small company that produced military equipment. His annual salary plummeted from $100,000 to $40,000. According to Wang's friend, the domestic violence incident destroyed him. After the incident, Jiaoli called her parents and said, "I want a divorce." Her parents advised her to think about their 3 children and try to salvage the relationship. Jiaoli stayed in China for 2 years, living mostly with her parents during this time. However, Wang, despite being fired from his defense job, never showed up to apologize to his wife or bring their children back to the U.S. By the end of 2014, under pressure from both sets of parents, Wang and Jiaoli began to consider reconciliation. When people brought up the subject, Wang coldly remarked, "If we reconcile, maybe Jiaoli will bring back the $100,000 from the house sale with her." Jiaoli struggled with her decision for a long time before deciding to return to the U.S. She realized that if she divorced Wang, she would have no job, no residency status, and would be raising 3 American citizen children on her own. The cost of living would be overwhelming. Ultimately, she also considered that her couldn't keep up with the Chinese education system, where academic pressure was intense while schooling in the U.S. was relatively easier. So she made the decision to return to America. From February to March 2015, Jiaoli brought her 3 children back to the U.S. Finally, in July of that same year, they moved to West Covina and bought a new house, the very house where the tragic event would later occur. At first, Wang treated Jiaoli well. She mentioned that he had a job, helped with some household chores, and was kind to the children. These basic improvements made her feel somewhat satisfied. But after about a month, Wang lost his job again, and they fell back into their old patterns with the intense arguments resuming. By September 2015, in order to make ends meet, Wang helped Jiaoli renew her nursing license and finally allowed her to work. However, Jiaoli had no idea how much money she was earning, as all of her wages were deposited directly into a bank account fully controlled by Wang. She didn't even know the account password. It seemed like everything had reverted to the way it was before. So was the tragedy caused solely by the couple's conflicts, or was there more to the story? As the investigation unfolded, more details emerged. With 3 children to care for and an unemployed husband, Jiaoli had no choice but to find a job as soon as her nursing license was reinstated. Fortunately, the demand for nurses in the U.S. was high. By September 2015, Jiali had secured a job and started working 3 to 4 days a week. In a family without a mother present, a man left to care for 3 children on his own would undoubtedly struggle. Jiali's parents, who adored their daughter and grandchildren, decided to come to the U.S. to help support her and the family. With Wang's approval, Jiali applied for a family visit visa for her parents, allowing them to stay in the U.S. for 6 months. Thus, Mr. Jiao and Mrs. Zhang arrived in the U.S. in late 2015. Despite Jiali having been married to Wang for nearly 10 years, this was the first time her parents lived under the same roof with their son-in-law. In the eyes of the neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Jiao were a harmonious couple who got along well with everyone in the community. Back in China, they lived in a high-end residential area in Chengdu, where they were well regarded for their character and reputation. Although they were both over 60, Mrs. Zhang looked younger than her age. Mr. Jiao was calm and skilled, while Mrs. Zhang was tall and elegant. This couple enjoyed a comfortable financial situation with a substantial pension. Besides their home in Chengdu, they owned a rental property and a vacation home in Hainan. It was clear that their retirement years were full of comfort, leisure, and abundance. The only concern for Mr. Jiao and Mrs. Zhang was the international marriage of their only daughter, Jiali. For 8 years, Jiali frequently returned to China with her children, and nearly every time she had a baby, she stayed for an extended period. However, none of Mr. Jiao's relatives or friends had ever met their American son-in-law. But the couple always seemed happy and explained that Wang worked in the defense industry, and jobs like that often involved secrecy, making it inconvenient for him to visit family in China. Mr. Jiao and Mrs. Zhang were avid users of social media, but during their stay in the U.S., they never posted any photos of their trip or their family on WeChat groups. Even during festive periods like Christmas, New Year's, and the Lunar New Year, prime times for sharing photos, they made no mention of their son-in-law. The last WeChat message from Mr. Jiao, although sent during his visit to the U.S., showed a picture of him and his wife traveling to an ancient town back in China. Originally, the couple had planned to return to China on April 19, 2016, but they rescheduled their departure to April 15th. Friends and relatives back in China were eagerly preparing to welcome them home. However, on April 14th, they received the devastating news that the elderly couple had died in the U.S. In Wang's testimony, Mr. and Mrs. Jiao were portrayed in a completely different light. He claimed that he accidentally shot his mother-in-law during a struggle, and that he shot his father-in-law in self-defense. Wang also stated that it was the unreasonable behavior and constant pressure from his in-laws that led to the tragedy. He recounted that on the evening of April 13, 2016, the night of the incident, Mr. and Mrs. Jiao were preparing for their trip back to China. Around 6:30 p.m., Jiali left for her night shift at the hospital, leaving her parents, husband, and 3 children at home. According to Wang, his father-in-law called him upstairs. Wang followed him to the second-floor bedroom where his in-laws were staying. They informed him that they intended to stay in the U.S. long-term. Wang objected, and an intense argument ensued. Wang claimed that his mother-in-law, Mrs. Zhang, started pushing him and verbally threatened to bang her head against the wall if he didn't agree to their demands. Believed this was a ploy to provoke him, and then called the police to accuse him of domestic violence. He described how his mother-in-law rushed into the bedroom, grabbed a sharp kitchen knife, and held it to her own neck, trying to force him to agree. His father-in-law then took the knife from her, pointed it at Wang, and stepped closer, saying, "I'm going to cut off your head." Feeling cornered, Wang said he threatened to call the police and have his father-in-law arrested, ensuring that he would never be able to return to the U.S. His mother-in-law fell to her knees, begging him. Wang told her that unless they packed their belongings and left immediately, never to return, he wouldn't forgive them. His father-in-law responded by saying they needed time to discuss it. Wang then waited in his own bedroom, but he noticed an eerie silence on the second floor. Growing nervous, he grabbed a fully loaded gun, opened the door to his in-law's bedroom, and walked in. As soon as he entered, his mother-in-law grabbed onto his leg. His father-in-law then charged at him, trying to wrestle the gun away. During the struggle, the gun went off, hitting his mother-in-law in the face. Wang claimed that, after his father-in-law came at him with a knife, he shot in self-defense. Due to the intensity of the situation, Wang said he emptied the entire clip. Later, when police knocked on his door, Wang explained to them, "I wanted to end it all, but I was still so angry. So I went back to the room, reloaded the gun, and shot a few more rounds at my in-laws. He also mentioned that he had thought about calling 911, but feared the police would scare his children. Although Wang's testimony sounded plausible on the surface, it was full of inconsistencies. In reality, according to Zhao Li and those close to the family, it was clear that Mr. and Mrs. Zhao were unhappy living in the U.S. However, to avoid straining their daughter's marriage, they rarely complained. In April 2016, tensions between Mr. Zhao, his wife, and their son-in-law had escalated significantly. According to rumors, the conflict centered around Wang's unemployment. The Zhao couple, already concerned about their daughter's international marriage, grew more worried seeing her shoulder the family's financial burdens alone. From Wang's perspective, his in-laws' behavior stemmed from their disdain for him. The growing friction culminated in a heated argument. Upon returning home, Yao Li's parents confided that Wang had threatened her father during the dispute, saying, "I'll make you disappear, and not even the police will find you." At the time, the elderly couple dismissed it as angry words, believing Wang would never be cruel enough to act on such a threat. They had repeatedly expressed their desire to return to China early, and finally rescheduled their flight for April 15th. Wang was also aware of their early departure. It took the police less than 2 days after the incident to officially arrest Wang. The lead investigator in the case stated that they had no other suspects, as all the evidence and leads pointed directly to Wang. Forensic experts found a large amount of gunpowder residue on Wang's body. Additionally, the DNA on the murder weapon matched Wang's DNA. Autopsy results revealed that both Mr. and Mrs. Jiao had been shot 12 times each, with most of the shots being fatal. One of the bullets had even entered Mrs. Jiao's skull. This was clearly an act of excessive violence. Moreover, Wang did not have a single injury from any struggle. His claim that he shot in self-defense was clearly fabricated. According to forensic experts, both victims were likely conscious throughout the attack and were still alive when Wang fired the second round of shots. In addition, Wang's youngest son, who was only 3 years old at the time, had been with his grandparents when the shooting occurred. After hearing the gunshots, the boy went downstairs by himself and hid in the bathroom with his older sister and brother. His pajamas were covered in blood. Wang's oldest son had secretly gone upstairs, where he witnessed his grandmother kneeling on the floor, with Wang standing in front of her, yelling at her. Wang then forced his children to participate in a horrific game, making them watch as he shot their grandparents. Terrified, the boy ran back to the bathroom and heard another series of gunshots. Even when the police arrived, Wang remained upstairs and never checked to see if his 3 children were safe. More importantly, neighbors confirmed that from the time Jiao Li left for work at 6:30 p.m. until the police arrived, no one else entered or left the house. All of this evidence clearly demonstrated Wang's brutal actions, and his defense fell apart under scrutiny. Due to the seriousness of the crime and its violent nature, the police initially set Wang's bail at a high $2 million, but later denied him bail altogether. Wang was detained at the local police station awaiting trial. On July 31st, 2017, the Pomona Superior Court concluded the preliminary hearing. The trial officially began in September 2018. After 2 years in custody, appeared noticeably thinner. Dressed in a blue uniform, he continuously shook his legs after sitting down, but maintained a calm expression. Yao Li, along with Wang's eldest daughter and son, testified for the prosecution. On October 1st, 2018, based on the overwhelming evidence, the jury found Wang guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 2nd, 2019, the judge sentenced Wang to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Until the very end, Wang refused to admit guilt and was extremely dissatisfied with his defense attorney. After requesting a change in his public defender 4 times in 2020, Wang, through his lawyer, filed an appeal seeking a retrial of the case. Upon reviewing the defendant's appeal, the judge from the California Supreme Court ruled to deny a retrial. This time, the monster was permanently confined to prison. Though this brutal case has concluded, there are still people silently bearing the aftermath. Dailai, who lost her parents, her youngest son, who witnessed the scene, and her 2 older children, who have been deeply psychologically affected. There is no recent information available online about them, but one thing is certain: this shadow will haunt them for the rest of their lives. This case highlights the significant issues surrounding convenience marriages that cross international borders. These marriages are often arranged with someone who already holds a green card in order to gain U.S. citizenship. On the surface, a convenience marriage might seem like a mutually beneficial transaction. However, due to the lack of emotional foundation, or even the absence of any real emotional connection, and the self-serving motivations of both parties, these marriages are at high risk of falling apart. Even without extreme outcomes like this case, reports of fraud, domestic violence, or a spouse seeking a more educated partner after immigration frequently arise. Therefore, it's essential to think carefully before entering into such a relationship, as it could lead to deep regret. Story 5. This is a case that shook the Chinese-American community in the 1990s, often referred to as the O.J. Simpson case of the Chinese community. The incident began on the night of August 18, 1993. John, white man, was watching TV at home. The NBA game had just ended, and his favorite team had lost. Feeling frustrated, John lit a cigarette. After putting it out, he was about to go to bed, when suddenly, there was an urgent knock at the door. John was surprised because it was so late. Who would be visiting him at this hour, and knocking so frantically? He opened the door to find an Asian man with a terrified expression. The man, speaking in heavily accented English, said that his wife had been murdered, and his son was missing. He asked to use John's phone to call the police. The city where the crime occurred was in the western coastal area of Los Angeles, one of the wealthiest regions in the U.S., known for its stunning scenery. In August, the weather here was extremely hot. By 11:35 p.m., Officer Barron, who was on duty, received a call about a homicide at a luxury apartment in the southern part of the city. 5 minutes later, Barron arrived at the scene. Upon entering, he saw a young Asian woman lying on her side on the living room sofa. She was wearing a sleeveless black and white polka dot dress, with no shoes on, and her underwear had been pulled down to her thighs. Her left shoulder was resting on a towel soaked in blood. A baby bottle was placed to the right of the sofa. As Barron was about to examine the body more closely, he heard footsteps upstairs in one of the bedrooms. Immediately, he drew his gun and ordered the person to come out. A man emerged looking panicked. He identified himself as the homeowner, the one who had called the police. He said the woman downstairs was his wife, and his son was missing. Barron escorted the man to the police car and continued to search the apartment. The officer found the missing son in a crib in the second-floor bedroom. It was a 5-month-old baby boy, whose face had been smothered with a pillow and a t-shirt stuffed into his mouth. An autopsy revealed that the woman had 19 stab wounds from a sharp object, all fatal. A defensive wound on her left arm showed that she had fought back fiercely before dying. The baby boy had also suffered the same fate as his mother, suffocating to death. According to initial estimates, the crime occurred between 10 p.m. on August 17th and 3 a.m. on August 18th, a window of 4 to 5 hours. The identities of the victims were quickly established. The woman, whose Chinese name was Ji Bung, had an English name of Jennifer Ji, and she was 25 years old. The baby boy was her son, named Kevin, and had just turned 5 months old. The man who claimed to be the husband and father of the victims was Jim Peng, a well-known Taiwanese businessman, often referred to as the king of electromechanics. Jim Peng, aged 50, owned a Taiwanese electronics company with branches in San Diego, Singapore, Shanghai, Xiamen, Shenzhen, and Qingdao. In the 1990s, the company had an annual revenue of $40 to $50 million. By those standards, he was a bona fide billionaire at that time. Jennifer, the female victim, was his mistress, and Kevin was their son. According to the investigation, Jennifer was born in Qingdao. She stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, had a slender figure, a beautiful appearance, and an extraordinary aura. Her father was an architect, and her mother was a doctor. Jennifer grew up in a well-off family and received a good education. She was a runner-up in tennis at the Chinese National Student Games. In September 1989, Jennifer graduated with a degree in marine chemistry. After several rounds of interviews, she was hired as an assistant manager in the public relations and business department at the Qingdao Hotel. This was considered a prestigious and well-paying job at the time. On August 4, 1990, by chance, Jim Peng came to Qingdao to attend a trade fair. At a banquet, he was instantly attracted to the beautiful Jennifer. Although Jim Peng was married and had 2 sons, he spent the next 3 days constantly by Jennifer's side. Before returning to Taiwan, Jennifer gifted him a white t-shirt which he wore. After returning to Taiwan, Jim Peng and Jennifer called each other almost daily, and their relationship grew more passionate. 2 months later, in October 1990, Jim Peng invited Jennifer to join him at a trade fair in Shanghai. In the letter he wrote, "Your youth and energy are unforgettable to me. Every night I dream of us meeting again." Enclosed were $300 and 2 designer dresses. Over time, they gradually became lovers. In January 1991, Jennifer left her job in Qingdao and moved to Shanghai, becoming the assistant to the general manager and executive secretary of Jim Peng's Shanghai branch. Later, in October 1991, Jim Peng arranged for Jennifer to go to San Diego, U.S. to study finance management and marketing. In March 1992, after Jennifer returned to China, Jim Peng opened a new branch in Qingdao, Jennifer's hometown, and appointed her as the general manager. In August 1992, Jennifer discovered she was pregnant. Jim Peng immediately applied for AB1 visa for her to give birth in the U.S. He rented a luxury apartment in the southern part of Mission Viejo, California, so Jennifer could rest and take care of her pregnancy. On March 16, 1993, Jennifer gave birth to a baby boy. During this time, Jim Peng only visited her 2 to 3 times, staying for 4 to 5 days each time before leaving. Unexpectedly, when he arrived on this visit, he only found the cold bodies of his lover and their child. According to Jim Peng, his trip to the U.S. this time was a last-minute decision, with the plane ticket purchased directly at the airport. He departed from Hong Kong and arrived in San Francisco at 10 a.m. on August 18th, then continued to Los Angeles. He arrived at Jennifer's apartment around 2:30 p.m. While still at the Hong Kong airport, he had called Jennifer. When he reached San Francisco, he tried calling again, but this time there was no answer. Upon arriving at the apartment building, he rang the doorbell since he didn't have a key, but no one answered. He went to the building's management office to borrow a key, but the staff found that his name wasn't listed as a resident, so they refused to give him one. Exhausted from the long journey, Jim Peng rested in the management office for a while and even took a short nap. After waking up, he went back to Jennifer's apartment and rang the doorbell again, but still no one answered. He left a note saying, "Bing, when you get home, come to the management office. I'm waiting for you there." It's important to note the context of that time. Since it was 1993, mobile phones were not widely available, so reaching someone was quite complicated and took more effort. By 5:30 p.m., the management staff was preparing to leave for the day, so Jim Peng went back to Jennifer's apartment door. By 11 o'clock p.m., Jennifer still hadn't returned. Jim Peng had a bad feeling. Based on what he knew about Jennifer, she wouldn't come home this late without a reason. He pushed the door open and was shocked to find it ajar, not locked at all. Jim Peng entered and saw Jennifer lying cold on the sofa. In a panic, he ran outside to the neighbor's house to borrow a phone and call the police. And that's the scene we mentioned at the beginning of this story. When news of the crime broke, the residents of Mission Viejo were in shock. This was a highly secure, affluent area where such brutal crimes were rare. What made this case even more sensational were the complex and controversial relationships between the people involved. A billionaire hiding his mistress and their child in the U.S., just 2 to 3 days before the murders of the mistress and the child. The billionaire's wife had also arrived in the U.S., staying in a house just 3 miles away from the mistress's residence. So who was the killer? This event caused a stir among the local population, especially in the Chinese community. Every day, people gossiped and speculated about the culprit. Everyone turned into an amateur detective. Some suspected Jin Peng. After all, from 2:30 p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m., why would he wait outside for 8.5 hours without trying to push the door? Furthermore, there was a phone inside the house. Why did he run to the neighbors to call the police? Perhaps during those 8.5 hours he had murdered his mistress and child, cleaned up the crime scene, and then went to the neighbors to call the police to create an alibi. The motive could be that his mistress was pressuring him to marry her, but since he didn't want to divorce his wife, Jim Peng killed her to solve the problem. But why would he kill his own child too? Moreover, the time Jim Peng arrived in Los Angeles was 2 o'clock p.m. on August 18th, while the police determined the time of death was between the night of August 17th and the early morning of August 18th. This timeline didn't match the suspicion against him. Others speculated that the killer could have been a man infatuated with Jennifer's beauty. After all, when the body was found, Jennifer's underwear had been pulled down, indicating a potential assault. It was possible that this man had satisfied himself and then killed Jennifer. However, the autopsy did not find any male DNA, and the positioning of the underwear seemed to be a setup by the murderer. Many also pointed fingers at Lisa Peng, Jim Peng's wife. They believed she had discovered her husband's affair and the fact that he had a child with his mistress in the U.S., which drove her to a fit of rage and murder. The timing of her arrival in the U.S. seemed too coincidental. So who was the real killer? Through a thorough examination of the crime scene, the police collected several key pieces of evidence. First, a brown hair was found in the bedroom while Jennifer had black hair. Second, a shirt button was found near the bedroom door, which did not belong to Jennifer or her son. Third, a kitchen knife was found under the sofa where Jennifer was lying. Fourth, there was a light bite mark on Jennifer's left arm, and a saliva sample was collected. Fifth, there was a small fan-shaped blood stain on the floor near the apartment door, and a smaller oval-shaped blood stain on the exterior of the door. This indicated that Jennifer was attacked as soon as she opened the door. Additionally, the blood trail extended from the carpet inside the door, across the sofa, and up the exterior of the door about 3 inches off the ground. There was also blood found on the baby's swing near the bathroom door. The hair that was found was analyzed, but didn't match anyone involved in the case. The shirt button's origin also couldn't be determined. The knife was consistent with the wounds, but there were no fingerprints or blood traces on it, making it impossible to confirm it as the murder weapon. Now, the only hope was the bite mark on Jennifer's arm and the saliva sample that was recovered. After a detailed comparison, experts found that the bite mark on Jennifer's arm matched the dental impressions of Lisa Peng, Jim Peng's wife. However, the margin of error was still relatively high. DNA from the saliva sample would need to be matched with Lisa Peng's DNA to be certain, but the amount of DNA in the saliva sample was very small, leaving uncertainty about whether it was enough for testing. After months of careful study, forensic experts finally concluded that the DNA in the saliva on Jennifer's arm matched Lisa Peng's DNA. However, by this time, Lisa Peng was at home in Taiwan. How could U.S. authorities extradite her from Taiwan to the U.S.? This posed a complex legal challenge. On January 1st, 1994, Jim Peng received a call from the Los Angeles police. They requested that he return to the U.S. to discuss a reward for finding the killer, and also suggested that Lisa Peng accompany him. Previously, due to the lack of progress in the case, Jim Peng had proposed offering a reward for any leads, but the police advised him to wait. This time, they used the reward as a reason to invite him back to the U.S., conveniently bringing his wife along. Initially, Lisa Peng didn't want to go, but Jim Peng insisted that they should cooperate with the police to clear her name. So the couple boarded a plane to the U.S. together. By January 5th, 1994, Jim Peng and Lisa Peng had arrived in Los Angeles. Upon arriving at their hotel, forensic experts immediately took 5 cubic centimeters of Lisa Peng's blood, likely to run another DNA test. 2 days later, on January 7th, the police informed Jim Peng to bring his wife and 2 sons to the police station for questioning. It's worth noting that Jim Peng's 2 sons were studying in the U.S. and living in the family's mansion. So Jim and Lisa Peng often visited the U.S. to stay for a few days to see their children. On the morning of January 8th, Jim Peng and his wife brought their 2 sons to the Mission Viejo police station. There, all 4 were asked to take a lie detector test. 3 of them passed, but Lisa Peng continuously failed the test. At 2 p.m., the police began a private interrogation with Lisa Peng. She denied knowing Jennifer's whereabouts. The police asked why. When they visited her home after the incident, they noticed her left leg was injured. Lisa Peng claimed she had fallen at home, and her younger son could testify to it. However, when her younger son was asked during his lie detector test, he said he didn't remember the incident. Around 6:30 p.m., the police announced the arrest of Lisa Peng. Lisa Peng was born into a modest family in Tainan. Her father passed away early, and the family consisted of 6 sisters and 2 brothers. As the second eldest, Lisa Peng had to shoulder the responsibility of supporting the family, along with her mother. 22 years prior, Lisa Peng had been working at a foreign electronics company when she met Jim Peng, a fellow Tainan native and a friend of her colleague. Although Jim Peng was of short stature, he was strong, hardworking, and ambitious in his career goals. After they fell in love, Lisa Peng learned that Jim wanted to start his own electronics company, but lacked the initial capital. She biked all over to borrow money from family and friends, managing to gather the first funds for their business venture. Both eventually quit their jobs and started their own business. At that time, the electronics industry was highly profitable. Before long, their business grew rapidly, expanding from a small workshop with a few employees into a large company with branches all over Taiwan, eventually spreading across Asia and Europe, becoming a multinational corporation. All of their success was due to the joint efforts of both husband and wife. In a later interview, Jim Peng even admitted, "My wife contributed greatly to my career." In the company, Jim Peng served as the chairman, while Lisa Peng held the position of chief financial officer. Back when they were still in Taiwan, the couple would come home from work and discuss everything together. However, as the business grew, Jim Peng frequently traveled for work, while Lisa Peng mostly stayed in Taiwan. Jim focused on his career, and even after more than 20 years of marriage, there were never any rumors of infidelity. Lisa Peng trusted her husband completely, until things started to change after his business trip to Qingdao in 1990. That evening, as Lisa Peng was helping her husband unpack, she found a woman's t-shirt in the suitcase with a lipstick stain on the collar. This was the same t-shirt that Jennifer had given to Jim as a memento, as mentioned earlier. At this point, Lisa Peng didn't know about Jennifer's existence. She asked her husband about the shirt. Jim Peng said it was a gift from someone. Lisa Peng questioned him, "This shirt is so small, how could it fit you? Why would they give it to you? And what about the lipstick stain?" Jim Peng dismissed her concerns, saying it was just part of business etiquette, and told her not to worry. Lisa Peng had no concrete evidence to prove that her husband was cheating, so she let it go. A few days later, when reviewing the company's phone bills, Lisa Peng noticed that calls were being made almost daily from her husband's office to a number in Qingdao. That's when she discovered Jennifer's existence. Lisa Peng met Jennifer 3 times before her murder. The first time was in April 1991. By then, Jennifer had become the assistant general manager of Jim Peng's Shanghai branch. Lisa Peng traveled to Shanghai and went to the hotel where Jennifer and Jim Peng were staying. The 3 of them had a conversation. The exact details are unknown, but they parted on tense terms. The second time was in the U.S. By that point, Jim Peng had arranged for Jennifer to study in the U.S. and stay in the family's mansion. One day, Lisa Peng called from Taiwan to the house in the U.S., and Jennifer answered the phone. Furious, Lisa immediately booked a flight to the U.S. Upon arrival, she found her husband and his mistress living together in her home, with Jennifer's clothes hanging in her bedroom closet. In a fit of rage, Lisa Peng slashed all of Jennifer's clothes in the closet. It was said that Jim Peng slapped his wife in front of Jennifer. The third time was in Qingdao. Even after Jennifer finished her studies in the U.S. and returned to Qingdao, Jim Peng still set up a new company there and appointed Jennifer as general manager. Lisa Peng went to Qingdao, demanding that Jennifer stay away from her husband. But in the end, she had to return to Taiwan, heartbroken and alone. After Lisa Peng's arrest, Jim Peng told reporters, "I trust my wife. She is kind-hearted and would never do something so cruel." He also stated that he would hire the best lawyer to defend her. On May 24, 1995, the Mission Viejo District Court officially began the trial. Jim Peng spent a large sum of money to hire Marshall Schulman, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the U.S., to represent his wife. Schulman was 67 years old at the time. The trial, from initial proceedings to appeals, lasted nearly 2 years. Here, I will only recount some of the most noteworthy and important details. In court, aside from DNA evidence, the prosecution's most crucial weapon was an audio recording. This piece of evidence ultimately shaped the direction of the trial. It turned out that on the day Jim Peng's family went to the police station for the lie detector tests, after the private conversation with Lisa Peng, the police arranged for the couple to talk to each other. They spoke in Chinese. Since the officers couldn't understand the language, they recorded the conversation. During the conversation, in response to Jim Peng's questions, Lisa Peng did not directly admit to killing Jennifer, but she did confess to meeting Jennifer and having a physical altercation. She claimed that Jennifer had accidentally fallen onto a knife and died. Attorney Schulman immediately objected, arguing that the police had used an illegal wiretap to obtain this private conversation, making it inadmissible as evidence. However, prosecutor Robert Mulco countered by saying that since police officers were present during the conversation, it was not private and no wiretapping issue existed. Furthermore, there was a legal precedent in California where a recording in Thai had been used as evidence in court, so the recording in this case was admissible. As for the DNA evidence, Schulman presented the argument that the person who bites is not necessarily the killer. He exploited the weakness in the prosecution's case by pointing out that the police had no direct evidence from the crime scene linking Lisa Peng to the murder, claiming that the DNA match meant nothing. Schulman explained that on the afternoon of August 17th, the day before Jennifer's body was discovered, Lisa Peng had indeed gone to Jennifer's apartment. They argued and Lisa Peng bit Jennifer's left arm before leaving. At that time, Jennifer was still alive, and she even made a phone call to a friend at 3:30 p.m. Schulman also pointed out that Lisa Peng was petite, standing less than 5 feet 3 inches tall, and questioned how she could have overpowered and killed Jennifer, who was 5 feet 8 inches tall, physically fit, and a regular athlete. Schulman then presented his own theory about the killer. He speculated that Jennifer was murdered around 2 p.m. on August 18th, and the perpetrator was Jim Peng. His reasoning was based on a series of suspicious actions by Jim Peng that day, such as waiting outside the door for 8.5 hours and going to the neighbor's house to make a phone call, among other things. At this point, you might be wondering, didn't the police originally state that the time of death was between 10 p.m. on August 18th? Why is Schulman now claiming it was 2 p.m. on August 18th? Schulman explained that in August, the temperature in Mission Viejo is high, and the heat can affect the body, leading forensic experts to make an incorrect estimate of the time of death. At this point, Prosecutor Molko called Jennifer's older sister to testify, asking if Jennifer had a habit of showering daily. You might be asking, why bring up the victim's shower habits at this point? When Jennifer's sister confirmed that she did shower daily, Prosecutor Molko stated, if Jennifer showered every day, and if the bite mark on her arm occurred in the afternoon on August 17th, then when she showered that evening, the saliva on the bite would have been washed off. So how could we have found residual saliva when the body was discovered on August 18th? Schulman immediately countered, what her sister remembers is Jennifer's habit a year ago. Who knows if, after having a baby, Jennifer still kept the habit of showering daily. Throughout the trial, the prosecutor and defense attorney engaged in fierce arguments, neither willing to back down. Outside the courtroom, the Chinese community was also divided into two camps. One camp believed that the murderer should be severely punished. Although Jennifer had intruded on someone else's marriage, a shameful act, this was still a homicide. She and her child were victims in this case, and Lisa Peng, suspected of murder, needed to face legal consequences. The other camp argued that Jennifer was greedy, seducing Jim Peng with no regard for morality. They believed that Lisa Peng killed to protect her family and deserved sympathy. Supporters of punishing the killer severely submitted a petition with signatures to the judge, demanding that the perpetrator be punished according to the law. Meanwhile, women who sympathized with Lisa Peng drove for miles to the courthouse, holding signs urging the judge to protect Lisa Peng and allow her to reunite with her family. Then on September 18, 1995, the trial entered the final stage of closing arguments from both sides. First, Prosecutor Malko gave his statement. He said that the victim, Jennifer, had been stabbed 18 times and her baby had been strangled to death. The baby was suffocated for as long as 5 minutes before passing away, indicating that the killer harbored extreme anger toward them. And this person could only be Lisa Peng. Initially, she was just jealous and angry with Jennifer. But after learning that Jennifer had given birth, and knowing that the child would eventually share in the $200 million inheritance with her 2 sons, Lisa Peng's rage intensified. She became determined to eliminate them. How did Lisa Peng find out where Jennifer was living? Malko pointed out that in July 1993, Jim Peng made a phone call from their home in Taiwan to Jennifer. Lisa Peng saw the number on the bill and called it back. Over the phone, Jennifer mentioned that she was living in a great place with a swimming pool and a very comfortable lifestyle. This prompted Lisa Peng to fly to the U.S. and arrange a meeting with Jennifer to talk. On the night of August 17th, after her children had gone to sleep, Lisa Peng went to Jennifer's apartment. Jennifer had even done her makeup, expecting Lisa Peng to arrive for a negotiation. But when she opened the door, she was immediately attacked. When it was defense attorney Schulman's turn, he continued to point to Jim Peng as the perpetrator, citing the reasons we mentioned earlier. Regarding the police theory that Jennifer and Lisa Peng had arranged to meet late at night, Schulman argued that Jennifer was a cautious person and would never invite someone, especially an enemy, to her home late at night. The closing arguments lasted 8 hours. In the end, Schulman asked the jury to consider Lisa Peng as innocent. Ultimately, the trial ended without a conclusion because 2 female jurors believed Lisa Peng was not guilty. By April 1996, the Mission Viejo Superior Court reopened the trial. This time, the jury unanimously found Lisa Peng guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa Peng continued to appeal the verdict. On September 30th, 1999, the California Court of Appeal ruled that the audio recording obtained by Mission Viejo police during the investigation was illegal, as it had been collected unlawfully. The recording could not be used as evidence for conviction. As a result, the court overturned Lisa Peng's life sentence without parole and sent the case back to the Mission Viejo Superior Court for a retrial. During the retrial, Lisa Peng's legal team spent a substantial amount of money to hire renowned pathology expert Dr. Michael Baden and forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee. Dr. Henry Lee pointed out that in the previous evidence presented by the police, a large handprint was found on a blood-stained pillow on the sofa. Based on the size of the handprint, it could be inferred that it belonged to a man. Therefore, there was a third person at the crime scene. Speaking of this third person, the police had actually suspected that Lisa Peng's eldest son might have been present at the crime scene. This could explain how the smaller-framed Lisa Peng could have overpowered the much taller Jennifer. However, this was merely police speculation, as there was no concrete evidence from the scene to prove the son's presence. As for the DNA evidence previously presented by the police, the defense also dismissed it. They argued that while it proved Lisa Peng was present at the scene when the crime occurred, it did not definitively prove that she killed Jennifer. On June 29, 2002, 9 years after the crime, the retrial verdict was announced. Judge William Froberg delivered the ruling. Due to a plea agreement reached by Lisa Peng's defense team with the prosecution, and considering Lisa Peng's good behavior while in prison, the court sentenced her to 11 years in prison. However, since she had already been incarcerated for 7 years since her arrest in 1994, she was eligible for release. The court agreed to release her in the fall, and she would be deported back to Taiwan by U.S. immigration. With this, the case concluded. We could not find exact information regarding Lisa Peng's life after her return to Taiwan. Some say that after her return, she divorced Jim Peng. Others claim the couple remained together and life returned to normal. If anyone has more information, feel free to share it in the comments. This case, happening so close in time to the O.J. Simpson trial, involved similarly clear evidence at the crime scene, a high-profile legal team, and an outcome that surprised most people. For these reasons, it became known as the O.J. Simpson case of the Chinese community.